Okay, we're a little bit early, but just checking this out. We'll be starting in about 10 minutes. So if anyone's out there, hello. We'll be starting very shortly. Just hold on tight while I set up here. And I hope you are well. Let's see, these, let's see here. Sorry, I'm still setting up here, but I don't mind going up live. Let's see, just pardon me for just having to make some last minute adjustments here, but we'll be starting in about a few minutes. We'll be talking about Dr. No. And if anyone's out there, if you could just let me know if the sound is good, if the sound is coming through okay. I hope it is. Let's see here. That should do it, okay. And great, thank you very much. Thank you. Just give me one more second here. Excuse me. I haven't done this in a while, so I feel a little bit rusty. So I'll just ask for your patience while I get set up here. Oh, great, here we go. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, great. So we have, let's see, Mr. Liam is here, hello. Mike Eli is here, hello. Stephen McNiff is here, hello. Charlie Amadeo, hello. And Wolfgratz and J Docs is here. Excellent, excellent. So we will be talking. Andre's here, hello. It's nice to see you. Let's see. And we will be starting momentarily, but I thought I'd just come on a little bit early just to see how everyone is doing. I hope everyone is doing very well today, wherever you are in the world. This is one of the, my first live stream in quite a while, I guess. So it's nice to be back live, as it were. So we will be once again talking about the film Dr. No. So if you're interested, stick around, and hopefully you can join in the conversation if you like. So I'm very happy to always hear from you, as always. So we'll be starting, as I say, at 11 p.m. Tokyo time. So I just came on a little bit early just to say hello. And but we'll be starting in about 7 minutes. So just hold on tight while we wait for a couple more people to show up. And if not, I think we have a good enough group to get going. But anyway, once again, the subject of the conversation today will be Dr. No. So looking forward to that, my friends. So just hold on for 1 second or a few minutes, and then we will get going. But in the meantime, I hope that you are doing very well during these times. You know, we're already in July 2020, and it's, on the one hand, we have a lot of things that have been happening this year. It's already been quite the year 2020 has, and so it's been it's been quite the year. And at the same time, we are now in July. So on the one hand, time seems to be going at a very odd pace, but on the other hand, I'm thinking now, and I think, oh my goodness, it's already July 2020. So there's that. So we shall, right, we're already, we've got half the year left, if you can believe it. So, time flies on the one hand, but yet at the same time, with all the stuff that's been going on, it's been a little bit, time has been moving in a very odd way. I don't know if you feel the same way, but let's see. So what did you see? So Charlie says, are you from Tokyo? I wasn't born in Tokyo, but I was born actually in a different part of Japan. but I do have family who is in Tokyo. So my hometown isn't, I don't consider my hometown Tokyo, but I have been living in Tokyo for a number of years, and I don't anticipate moving anywhere, so I'll probably be living in Tokyo for the foreseeable future. So, but this is where I live now. So anyway, thank you very much, and let's see. We'll just wait a few more minutes, and we shall be. And you ask, how did you learn English at such a high level? Oh, thank you very much. I have a number of Q&A videos that I uploaded. I think I uploaded about 20 of them, in fact, where I was answering all these questions from viewers. And some of the questions that I did receive were about my background and I think some people might be or were interested why I don't know, something about my English level, I'm not sure. But if you are interested, I would suggest that you can take a look at some of those Q&A videos. I forget which one exactly, but I did answer some questions about my upbringing and where I went to school and things of that nature. So I would just suggest you take a look at those if you're interested. I do answer those and some other questions as well. So, but Paul Smith is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. I hope you're well. So greetings from Scotland, you say. So hello to you from Tokyo. I hope you're well. Again, we will be starting in about a few minutes, so just hold on tight, and we will start the discussion about Dr. No momentarily. So get your whatever it is you're drinking, bottles of water or tea or whatever it is. I have my bottle of water here, so I might need it because I admit I'm feeling a little bit, not quite 100%. So I don't know how long I'll be able to do the live stream today, but I'll certainly try my best to go as much as I can with the live stream. But we'll see how it goes, and hopefully that will again, we'll just see how it goes, and then I'll be relying on you in the live chat with the discussion about Dr. No. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts about this very interesting film, Dr. No. So again, we'll be starting our discussion about this film in a couple minutes. So, all right, there we go. Glowing to Hobbit is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. Great, nice to see you, my friend. I hope you're doing well. Charlie asks, any new pickups? No, nothing in particular. I'm not making any purchases in the Barnes & Noble's Criterion sale because I'm living in Tokyo, and apparently the sale, I wouldn't have participated anyway, but now I'm hearing that the Barnes & Noble isn't shipping to most of the rest of the world, and so that's a bit of a shame. But I do have a couple titles, but nothing too extensive. But I've actually been I've actually not been spending that much on new purchases over the past few months because we wanted to be extra cautious because of the circumstances in the world, and you can never be too cautious, I think. And so while I haven't, I've been purchasing some, I haven't been purchasing as many as I used to. And so just to save for a rainy day, as it were, because you can never tell. But anyway, but great. We'll be beginning in 1 minute. So anyway, thank you very much for joining. Wolfgratz is here. Hello. Zyrother is here. Hello. John White is here. And you have a question about Criterion, but in 4K. So thank you very much for the question. But I will probably, and David Jones is here. Hello. So I will be, if you want to bring up the question in another video, please feel free to do so. Today I will be talking about Dr. No. So this live stream will be about Dr. No, the James Bond film. And so let's begin, and I'll just explain the preliminaries just in case anyone is new to the live streams and how I conduct the live stream. So let's begin, shall we? So greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and welcome back. It's been a little bit of maybe a few weeks, I think, since our last one, and I think the last James Bond film that we discussed was The Living Daylights, the Timothy Dalton film, The Living Daylights. And so today it is with great pleasure that I can share with you some thoughts that I have about this film, Dr. No, from 1962. This is, of course, the first of the James Bond films that are produced by Broccoli and Saltzman, and this is the first film that features Sean Connery in the role of James Bond 007. So there are a lot of significant aspects to this film, and it is my intention during the course of this live stream just to share some observations, some little details that I think might be interesting, and from there hopefully we can have a short, or not short, but we can have a nice conversation, you and I and the rest of us in the live chat. I look forward to that very much. And so let me just set up the preliminaries now, which is that anyone who is interested in talking about this film, you're welcome to do so in the live chat. I am very much open to hearing your thoughts about this. And I do want to make a few points, though, which is that I am going to be talking about this film, Dr. No, in some detail. And so if you haven't seen the film, I don't want to spoil it for you. So I would suggest, if you haven't seen the film, maybe you can turn off this live stream and then you can come back. This live stream should be uploaded as a video after it's going to be finished, and so you can always come back to this channel, and you can watch it as a video after you've seen the film. And so once again, if you haven't seen the film, I would suggest that you turn off the live stream, and you can come back at any time whenever it's good for your schedule. And the other thing too is that I never approach these live streams claiming that I'm an expert in any way. I don't have any deep knowledge about this film, and I don't claim to have any insider information about the production of this film. I'm not involved in the making of it. I'm not a member of the crew. I'm not related to anyone who's a member of the crew or anything of that nature. So I'm here strictly as a fan of this film, someone who has seen this film over the course of many, many years since I was very young. And so I'm just approaching this as a fan. And so I don't claim to know absolutely everything about this film. And while I'll try to address all the questions that may come during the live chat, I can't claim to be able to answer everything. And so if I can't address all the points that you are interested in, please accept my apologies in advance. But again, that's just the nature of my approach to this film, again, just as a fan of this film. And I also want to say that if you want to ask me some questions about this film, you are welcome to do so in the live chat, and this is open for everyone to discuss the film if they want. I just ask a few things about the live chat, though, which is that I will be focusing my attention and my energy today on the film Dr. No. And so if you want to ask me a question or give me a comment about the film Dr. No, that's fine, and I'll be very happy to address it to the best of my abilities. However, if you have a question or comment addressed to me that is on a subject or a topic that is not Dr. No, then I will, let me just say that I will just skip over that today. Again, I want to focus my attention on Dr. No today. And so if you have any non-Dr. No related question or comment for me, then you can, of course, leave a comment or a question under a video, and I will certainly do my best to address it when I can. But once again, I just ask for your understanding in advance, because I do want to focus my energy on this film Dr. No today. And also the live chat is the space that is available to you to have discussions with people here. So please feel free to talk about Dr. No, or to have conversations among each other, and hopefully you can meet new people here. That's always the hope that I have. And even where there is disagreement, even where one might not see eye to eye with the opinions set forth by others in the live chat, I will hope and I will trust that all of you, as you always do, you will always treat each other with respect, and you will have a nice sense of mutual camaraderie and courtesy towards each other and towards what it is everyone has to say. Even where there is disagreement, there is always room for nice discussion. And so I know that you will treat each other with respect and courtesy, as you always do. You've always afforded me such nice courtesy, and so I know that you will afford everyone else here the same level of courtesy, as you always do, my friends, as you always do. And the, let's see, and I think with that, I was going to say something else, but I just forgot. So, this is a live chat or live stream, and so there might be errors or glitches along the way. I mean, that's the nature of live streams. So I'm sure that I can have your understanding along the way. I will certainly do my best to keep the conversation going as much as I can, as far as I can. If I am unable to address your comment for whatever reason, it's not meant, nothing is meant by it. It's just I'm here by myself and I'm trying to keep track as best as I can. And oftentimes I lose track. I sometimes skip over something by accident, and so that's certainly nothing is intended by that, but it's just purely accidental on my part. But please accept my apologies in advance if that indeed happens to you. So. But anyway, my friends, with that, let us proceed with a quick, just general opening statement, if you don't mind, about Dr. No, this film from 1962. I think the kind of approach that I want to bring to this from the outset is just to talk about general impressions and feelings that I have about this work. And I should say from the outset that I am a big fan of the James Bond films. I've always been a big fan of them ever since I was a little kid. Growing up, these films have always been a part of my life, and I was very fortunate to have been able to experience watching the films when I was at a fairly young age. And along the way, I discovered Dr. No, as we always do when we are discovering films as kids growing up. And I do remember that my first impressions of this film are as they are now, which is that this is, on the one hand, a film that I think is a debut film. It is the first film in the series, and I think in many respects, therefore, it does set a certain template or style that the other films will follow, to a certain extent, of course, to a certain extent. The character of James Bond is established in the performance of Sean Connery. There is the process, if you will, of a problem that arises in terms of Jamaica and Strangways and what happens to him, and the whole notion of M giving Bond the assignment to discover what happened to Strangways, and then Bond having his interactions with M, with Moneypenny, and a little bit of tension arises, and then we have the adventure, the mission, if you will, of discovering what happened in Jamaica, and that leads to, of course, meeting other characters, meeting Felix Leiter and Quarrel and others, and then of course some of the villains of the piece, Professor Dent, of course, and the other henchmen or henchwomen in the vicinity, leading up, of course, to the ultimate confrontation with the villain, who is Dr. No, and the film is named after this villain. And then there are also other allies and also other love interests that we see along the way. Sylvia Trench, and also Miss Taro, and then we have Honey Rider, of course. And this all leads to action, suspense, and stunt set pieces, as well as seeing James Bond and the dangerous kind of heroic, dark heroic character that he poses himself, especially in this film, and so on and so forth. And so in many respects, I would suggest that this film feels like a strong basic template for the films to come, in certain regards anyway, as directed by Terence Young, and the Terence Young style that is applied to this world that is given form in this cinematic existence, if you will. So there is a lot here that is very much of a template type of feel, and yet at the same time, I think there are a lot of other things that make this strikingly unique and strikingly different from the rest of the films that we will see later in the series. For instance, this feels like it is a detective story more than some of the other James Bond films might feel. There is always a sort of a mystery element to any of the James Bond adventures we will see, but it feels like, I don't know if you agree with me, but this film feels in particular like a detective mystery thriller, as well as a spy thriller, because of the trail that James Bond is following in terms of what's going on, what was the mystery, why was Strangways killed, what is the mystery of Crab Key, who is Dr. No, and all these clues, but also all these mysteries and unknown factors arise, and it's of course up to James Bond and us as viewers who are following his every move, essentially, to figure out the whole plot, and that's where we go throughout the film. So there is a sense of continuity with the other films, of course, but there is also a focus that is, I think, I don't know if quieter is the right word, but there is a sense, if you will, of this being a film that seems also to stand out from the rest of the series in ways that I think are also very valuable and very vivid and very exciting. And so I consider this work to be a lovely sort of hybrid, if you will, between things that are unique to it and the experience of watching it on the one hand, and then on the other hand, things that we will see as being part of the James Bond continuity of films to come, especially in the form of James Bond portrayed by Sean Connery as directed by Terence Young. And so this is all to say that I find this film to be a very fascinating work. And it is a James Bond film, but it also feels like a film that stars Sean Connery as the character whose name is James Bond. I don't know if I've made the distinction clear enough. In other words, it does feel like it does feel like a one-off, and yet we understand that it is the inauguration of what we know to be the long-running series of James Bond films up to the present day. And therefore, there are a lot of interesting aspects to the film, even now when we watch it and when I watch it, and that's how I always approach this film. And there are really excellent things about it. There are also some somewhat, how should I put it, questionable things that I'll try to bring up as well. In particular, I do have some comments also about depictions of of the sort of depictions of other characters, let's say of the characters in Jamaica, the characters of we understand to be there are some characters who are of Asian descent in terms of ethnicities, and so there are some. I don't know if concern is the right word, but there are some elements that I do want to bring up if we have the time in terms of depiction of the characters. But those are, I don't want to suggest in any way that I dislike the film. I'm really a big fan of this film. And I think it is very kind of a hard-boiled, very taut suspense thriller that is also an action thriller, and it's very exciting even now. And some of the set pieces still hold up really well, and I think it is ultimately anchored down by a number of key elements, which I'll try to get to later. First is the direction by Terrence Young, and then the second is the performance by Sean Connery. And there are other elements too as well. The set design, the Ken Adams sets, the performance by Joseph Wiseman, and the look, the setting, if you will, Jamaica, Ursula Andress, of course, and the use of the theme that we understand, the Monty Norman theme as arranged by John Barry and company. And so all these elements, of course, are pretty much cemented into the legend that is James Bond, the cinema incarnation of James Bond. But I think ultimately that has a lot to do with Terrence Young and then Sean Connery. And so I'll try to address those to the best of my ability during the live chat today. But before we continue, let me just stop here and let me go to the live chat, and we will see what's going on here. So let's see, David Jones is here. So David Jones says, Sean Connery gave a magnificent performance in his first outing as James Bond 007 with Dr. No. Yes. And let's see, Gloin de Hobbit says, oh, here, Elliot Cohen is here. Hello. Mainly movies. Hello. It's nice to see you, my friend. And let's see here. Stephen McNiff says, top 5 Bond film for me. Great. Let's see. Okay. Zyrother says, very talky movie. Far less action than later entries, which is a good thing. Makes it stand out. Yes, I think you said exactly what I tried to say now, except in a much better and more succinct manner. So thank you very much for that. Let's see. Charlie Amedeo says, how do you feel this film ranks among Sean Connery's other Bond performances? I don't know about ranking per se, but I do think it is a very strong performance. And let's see, Zyrother says, as a first outing, very good, but he is far better once he is more comfortable with the character from Goldfinger onward. I would even suggest maybe from Russia with Love as well, but that'll be a conversation for another day. Elliot Cohen says, those early Bond DVDs fill me with so much nostalgia. ALJ says, Dr. No is one of my favorite movies in the franchise. I especially love everything regarding the villain, so Dr. No. His evil plot, his presence throughout the movie, his lair, the actor work, etc. Yes, that is such a good point, and I'll try to get to that momentarily. Wolfgrat says, it's certainly low on gimmicks, which I have no problem with. I like the film, although I don't think it's Connery's best outing. Let's talk about that. That's a really interesting comment there, and I think a lot of people are commenting about Sean Connery and what his performance is. And I think one of the things that's really striking is that he has a really take charge type of attitude in the way he's portraying James Bond here, almost in a very confident take charge attitude that is also rugged and very physical. And one of the and he's very kind of exuding a kind of sort of what's the phrase? A sort of an aura or sexual charisma which is obviously very, very evident in the personage of Sean Connery and the way he is portraying the character. And so this is, of course, one of the most iconic characters being portrayed by one of the most famous actors. His fame arises, I think, in large part, at least during the early 60s, from the James Bond films. You know, we have to remember that these were really popular films. And Sean Connery and James Bond, I think, this is one of those roles that Sean Connery will be remembered for, and quite rightly so, because we see the elements of the performance here. There is a smooth, charming charisma which never weakens. It always has a confidence. I remember there are many moments where we see this, and he never shows any weakness, which I really find. I should take that back. He almost never shows any weakness. There are moments where he does have a certain sense of frightened vulnerability in this film, and I think those moments really help to round out a kind of human element to the character in an interesting way. So what do I mean by this? So there's, of course, many people have commented, many other much more intelligent people than I have commented about the many factors that make Sean Connery's performance really great. There is his sense of physicality, if you will, and also the use of his eyes and the kind of sexual charm on the one hand, but also exuding menace and threat on the other. For instance, the way he seems to have so much control, if you will, in terms of meeting Sylvia Trench at the very beginning and seducing her at the very beginning before he goes to Jamaica. And then moments later, we see him observing Jones, the driver, at the airport, and then the photographer also at the airport, and we see Bond going to the payphone and making a call to Government House, and then discovering that not only is the driver not sent for him to pick him up, but also that it seems like Bond is noticing that the driver and the photographer are in cahoots. And so this is all done through his eyes as he's looking through the glass, and there's no motion. It's very still and cold, and yet we see this cold, icy determination forming in his eyes and in his manner and demeanor, which then leads to the first sort of a stunt fight, the fight between the driver and Bond, and this gives way, of course. This gave way from not really a car chase, but it was a fast speed car drive that didn't rely on backstream rear projection, if you will, but it was an actual car driving down an actual road at actual high speeds, then leading to the fight between Jones and then Bond, with Bond obviously showing the upper hand. And so already we see the confidence and also the ruggedness and also the cool, icy demeanor. But also there is, even in the fight, this sense of being a little bit roughed up, being not quite sure what's going on. Notice Sean Connery's Bond, his reaction when he sees that Jones is dying after breaking open that cigarette, and we see his reaction smelling the thing, and then it goes into his arrival, and then he has that wonderful throwaway comic quip, make sure he doesn't get away. And then, of course, that is the introduction, if you will, of the humor that was laced into Sean Connery's performance as Bond, starting in Dr. No, but then continuing on all the way through the rest of his tenure. And we understand from many of the documentaries about the making of this film that this seems to be something that was Terrence Young and Sean Connery. They wanted to inject kind of morbid humor. And so we see more of these one-liners appear here and there throughout the film. And so we already have this the basis, if you will, for a lot of great things. We have the strong, rugged character. We have the sexual charisma. We have slight vulnerability that shows through every once in a while. And then we have the one-liner quips. And then this essentially is the performance that carries us throughout the remainder of this film. So we do see those moments of confidence, cool confidence, even under pressure. Remember that great moment when Bond and Honey Rider are in Dr. No's lair, and they're holding hands as they're about to go into the elevator to meet Dr. No for the first time. And then Honey Rider says, I'm glad I'm not the only one who's nervous. And she notices, of course, that Bond is nervous because they're holding hands, and he's sweating. And he says, yeah, he admits that he's also nervous. But he doesn't lose his cool. At least he doesn't lose his demeanor, his outward demeanor. And so that is a nice augmentation, if you will, of this kind of cool iciness that we saw from the very outset of the film. And yet there are other moments in the film where we do see augmentations of other parts of this setup of the character, if you will, as portrayed by Sean Connery during the opening minutes of the film. I think most famously we see the moment where he is confronted with the spider in his bed at night. And there is, of course, that really famous close-up shot of his face, just in horror, but he has to stay still because he knows that any sudden move will mean death. And so we have that wonderful moment with him and the spider crawling. He's just waiting for the spider, of course, to crawl off his arm so he can throw it down and do the wonderful thing with the dun, 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 right? So that is a real excellent, and that is one of the most famous examples of Bond being vulnerable and Bond showing nervousness and panic. It's not too much though, because he does manage to have the situation under control, as he usually does. But that is an example of one of the cracks of vulnerability that we will see elsewhere as well. And notice also when he drinks the coffee in Dr. No's lair, and it's drugged, and so first Honey Rider succumbs and she falls asleep, she passes out, and then he realizes, he puts two and two together, and he says, the coffee. He just throws the coffee down onto the table or something, and then he's just struggling, and then he collapses. And so that's another example of a kind of forced or compulsory vulnerability, yes, because it is induced by the fact that he was drugged. So he couldn't help it. But incidentally, I think it was James Bond himself who insisted that they drink the coffee. So I guess in one way it probably was his fault. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the point is that this is another example of Sean Connery's performance, allowing for vulnerability and allowing for the cool, confident Bond, and allowing for the sexiness and allowing for the deadliness. And I think also this is of course coming together in what has to be one of the most famous or infamous moments of this film, and perhaps in the tenure of Sean Connery as James Bond, which is the killing of Professor Dent. Now, this is, of course, perhaps seen as being maybe self-defense, perhaps, although not really, because Professor Dent was unarmed, and James Bond knew that that's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your 6. And so he knew that he was out of ammunition, or at least he needed to reload. That was the idea. And so Bond was in the position of superiority for the entire time. And yet he kills Dent in cold blood, as we know, which is really quite shocking. And especially after Dent is shot, he then shoots him again in the back. And I mean, we understand that I think the original intention of the film was to have James Bond actually shoot him more times, but we only see James Bond shoot just a limited amount of times before he unlocks the silencer and blows on it, and then he realizes that his job is done for now, and this will lead him to the next act of the film, where they will travel to Crab Key. But this moment is quite shocking and quite devious, and also very Bond and very Connery Bond. I should note also that I like the detail of how if the scene was originally intended for him to shoot him more times, it's interesting that he seems, Connery's Bond, at least in Dr. No, seems to be one for excess. I mean, we saw how many times he was trying to kill the spider, and he just did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, many times. So I'd like to think that maybe that kind of mindset was probably with Connery's Bond, in terms of really just letting go when it's in terms of his release of anger and frustration and revenge, if you will, revenge against Professor Dent, although ultimately we only see him shoot a number of times, but also revenge against that spider. But anyway, that's a very, very minor point. But this is all to say, therefore, that I think Sean Connery's performance is very, very good. It's quite excellent, in fact. And of course, as with any performance that appears in more than one film, we will see evolutions, and we will see changes, or we will see consistencies, or we will see things that will stay the same. And I do think we will see parts of Connery's performance that will evolve, and that will turn into something slightly different as we go from film to film to film to film. But even along the way, as I'm sure you will also observe, or at least I hope you will observe, I think there are elements that we see in Connery's performance now that we will also see as through lines throughout the remainder of his time as James Bond. And so it's really amazing to see him do what it is he does here. And even those little moments too. I don't know if you remember this, but when he's meeting M in his office, and M is explaining what's going on, and M gets up and he turns, and the reason why he gets up is he wants to go to the mantle and pick up I think it's a match in order to light his pipe, M's pipe. Well, if you notice when M gets up and he turns, James Bond, when he's sitting in the chair in front of M's desk there, he actually offers M his lighter. I think it's his lighter. But M either ignores him or doesn't notice, and he goes and lights the pipe himself. And I always thought that was a really interesting moment, because it's almost like James Bond Connery's Bond wants to please M, or wants to be like showing that he is accommodating in even the littlest of ways. And M either scoffs at this or just doesn't notice. And I think that that tension really adds something to the dimension of the relationship between Bernard Lee's M and then Sean Connery's Bond. But it also shows the sense of Sean Connery's Bond being almost like he is, of course, an adult secret agent, of course, but there's also this tension that seems to be, I mean, Bernard Lee's M is, I wouldn't call him avuncular necessarily, but he is certainly almost paternal. He is certainly, of course, a source of authority. And so, and like kind of not paternal, but maybe adult authority. And so if we think of Bernard Lee's M as adult authority, then Connery's Bond is almost like a schoolboy, as it were, at least, especially when he's with M. And so I like that dimension. And I like how Connery's Bond really can't seem to pull one over on M when he tries to walk away with the Beretta, when he's trying to debate M and Boothroyd, in fact, about the pros and cons of the Beretta, and he's obviously wanting to support the pros, whereas the M and company want to want to debate him as to the cons of the Beretta, right? It jammed on him in his last job, and he had to spend 6 months in hospital on account of it. And I guess my point is that this Connery's Bond is given further extra dimension, especially depending on the characters that he's with. And this is very clear when he's with M. This is very clear when he's with Miss Moneypenny, and it's very clear when he's with the other characters. And so I like this sense of, I don't want to call it malleability, but this sense of adaptability, perhaps, in the way, in the buoyancy, if you will, of Connery's performance as he goes from scene to scene to scene. This is, of course, not exclusive to Sean Connery. Of course, we will see, or we have seen, other actors who have played James Bond who have exhibited this similar type of adaptability. But I think in particular, Sean Connery's performance really gives way to this, and especially it being the first portrayal of James Bond, I think we really note how almost groundbreaking, or how groundbreaking it is in terms of its foreshadowing, let me put it that way. And so there's a lot to be said about Connery's performance. Again, it will grow, it will change as we go from film to film to film, but even now, this is a really grand entrance, and Connery does such a great job. Oh, and of course, we have to understand that it's not just Connery. We know that there are other people at play who are really forming the character of Bond, and I'll try to get to that in a moment. But I hope that answers the question, or the comment, which is a great one from Wolfratz and others about Connery's performance. And Going to Hobbit continues. So, in my humble opinion, almost every spy movie borrows from Dr. No. Let's see, Zyrothers here is talking about the villains. Let's see, Cartwheel Video, hello, Daisuke, love Dr. No. Tomahawk238 says, love this film, seems like lately it's become cool to dismiss it for Bond fans, but I've always had it in my top 5. Oh, really? You know, I must admit, I'm not necessarily always on the pulse of the current trends of Bond fans. I consider myself a Bond fan, but I'm not necessarily in the know when it comes to the current trends of the Bond fan community as of now. And so I wasn't aware that there might have been a shift maybe against this film, or the tide was not necessarily in favor of this film as of now. I wasn't aware of that. I always thought of this film being regarded as being an important film in the history and trajectory of the James Bond franchise, of course being the first, but also it sets up so many things, and also it is a really taut, exciting story, which is in essence a detective story. And I should also point out too, that before I forget, as I say, I love the Bond films. And there's some films that I like more than others, of course, but I love the Bond films. And one of the things that I love about the films that I love the most are that I love the Bond films where Bond isn't necessarily the center of the universe. And what I mean by this is, as we get to other later films, even within the Sean Connery run, there are the bigger films, the more outlandish plots, as we get to, say, Thunderball with its really large plot, and then You Only Live Twice, which is even larger, right? And so, M says, this is the big one, 007. And so 007 seems almost to be like almost a superhero. Everyone knows Bond. Everyone seems to understand that Bond is one of the best, as it were. And while I appreciate those films, I always liked Bond when he was depicted as being just a little part in a bigger, larger machine of MI6 and spycraft. He works as a part of a network, if you will, of spies, both in the field and also back at home. And I always liked that because it really placed emphasis on the nature of spycraft. And I was always a big fan of the spycraft aspect of spy films, and James Bond is included. And not that we don't get that in other bigger, more higher budgeted films. I mean, we do, of course, we do. But here in the sort of more low-key films like Dr. No, I think those come out because those become very important, right? Because instead of the larger action set pieces, we have to rely on movement and reaction, and also little details that occupy the time and space of the running time of the film. So, for example, Bond is not the first person we see. You know, we see the whole operation of the British intelligence and communication lines, W6N, W6N, and we see people working both in Britain and also on the field, so Strangways and the woman who was just sent out there recently to work with Strangways. And then we see on the other line, we see many people in operation in British government in terms of communications. And then we see someone from British government having to pick up Bond to take him to escort him to a meeting, an emergency meeting with M. And then we see we see, of course, other networks, of course, of the secondary characters, of the supporting characters. Felix Leiter is not a member of British government, of course. He is the CIA, or as some characters in the film like to say, the American CIA. And so, and then we have Quarrel. And Quarrel, according to Felix Leiter, Quarrel is someone who's been helping Felix Leiter, and then also by extension Strangway. So it's not necessarily that Quarrel is described in the film anyway as being a government agent for one particular government or the other, but he is an ally. And so, but my point is that even with the secondary characters like Leiter and Quarrel, and that template is something that we will see carried through in other films from Russia with Love onwards. Still, in Dr. No, unlike those other films, we do get a really larger, more direct sense of Bond being just part of a larger machine. And that's something I really like. Again, it places the emphasis on spycraft, and also it allows for elements of spycraft to come into the film. For instance, the little bit with the hair that he puts on the, against the closet doors there to see if anyone, as he's out of the room, if anyone has come in and has looked through the hotel space. And so that is always an interesting element. You know, when I was a little kid, I didn't understand what that was at the time, so I had to ask my parents what that meant, and so he just wants to put something there in order to check later to see if someone has been searching through his room. And so I always loved that little moment of that kind of spycraft, if you will. We do see little bits of spycraft here and there later in the films, of course, but once again, a film with the tone like Dr. No and the quiet, if you will. Remember that scene, how it played out. There was no music. It was just him in his room after he got his vodka martini, and he's getting ready to meet Dent and the others, and so he has to. And it's a really quiet moment, and there's no sense of build-up. Really, it's a very just a almost calm. You know, he's just taken a shower. He's just freshened up, and so it's a very quiet moment. And so there's no sense of escalated suspense, and it's not really paid off too, because we don't see the henchmen come into the room like in any other film that we might see later in the franchise. We probably could have had a fight scene between a henchman and Bond. Maybe Bond discovers someone searching his room, and then that causes a fight, and that will be another fight or something. But we never see that. And so this bit with the hair across the two doors there, this is something that is just spycraft, and it doesn't have a payoff, except when we come back later and we have the exact same shot, but with the strand of hair missing. That's the payoff. That's it. And so I find this kind of detail in a film like Dr. No really, really refreshing, and it's, again, placing emphasis on the fact that he is a spy. He's a detective and he is a spy, and he really has to rely on these lo-fi techniques in order to be sure that he is covering his tracks. And I really, really like this aspect of James Bond. We will see it in other films. I would suggest in some aspects anyway, we might see a little bit of this in, for instance, Casino Royale, which we will be talking about 2 weeks from now. But it's played out somewhat significantly differently, of course, but my point is that there is a sense also in that film, as well as this film, of at least James Bond being part of a team, or part of a larger network, if you will. And so I really like that. It really creates a larger world, and it also means that Bond is just one of many agents. And so there is kind of an almost inherent, almost subconscious level sense of his being expendable. And so if he's expendable, then of course there could be risk to his life and body. And I think that also adds further augmentation to the moments of vulnerability that I was suggesting earlier. We have the moment of the spider where he could have the character could have died, or there are other moments too when he's captured by Dr. No and he's subjected to a lot of hardship, physical hardship, when he's trying to escape. There's a lot of pain that he feels and that his performance registers, and that we feel as viewers because he is registering it in his performance, more so than we might see him perform similar sorts of scenes in other Bond films. And so my point is that there is a sort of subconscious subcurrent or undercurrent, if you will, of Bond being expendable, and that he could die at any moment. Of course, it's not going to happen because he's the hero, and we understand this. But that's why I use the word subconscious. And so, and I think this stems from the idea that he is just one small part of a larger machine. He is not the center of the world, but he is one small part of the larger machine. And so this means that there is, I think, an inherent level of suspense that is generated. And therefore, I like this kind of depiction of the lo-fi spycraft Bond being part of a larger machine type of depiction. And so I think that's what people say when this is more down-to-earth Bond, or this is a more a kind of a DIY type of Bond, and I really like that. So, but that's a really good point about it being regarded in Bond fan circles today. So I'll have to keep an eye out for that when I visit those forums next. So thank you very much for that. And Wolfgratz continues, I'd be inclined to say that there's a big difference between full Bond type movies and the more down-to-earth Dr. No. Yes, again, just like Zyrother before, Wolfgratz, your comment comes at just the most opportune time. You said exactly what it is I tried to say just now, but you said it more succinctly and much more cleverly than I ever could. So thank you very much for that, my friend. Thank you. You should be doing live streams too, you and Zyrother and many other friends here. Thank you so much for that. Ben Van my dear friend, Bond, James Bond. Let's see. Zyrother continues, Dr. No and From Russia with Love are quite distant from later entries. That's an interesting comment. I think maybe that has something to do with the proximity, and also that they were still early in the franchise and people didn't know if this would still be an ongoing series or not. And also it, I think, has to do with the fact that we still have Terrence Young, who is directing these films. And of course, Terrence Young will come back again to direct Thunderball. But it's really the style, this is really the style of the Bond films that we see in Dr. No and then From Russia with Love. From Russia with Love will be a different discussion for a later day, of course. But let's focus in on Dr. No while you've brought it to my attention with regard to Terrence Young's style. And I think this has been well documented about how Terrence Young was, in many ways, a sort of a living example of the type of sort of a gentleman British gentleman type of personality that he was able to infuse the character of Bond with in this film, in terms of his knowledge, in terms of his experience, his worldly experience, in terms of what he knew about wines and good fine dining, and Dom Perignon, and tailors and Savile Row, and Turnbull Nasser shirts, and things of that nature. And so this is the other component of why I think this depiction of Bond is so successful. We mentioned Sean Connery before, and the other component to that is obviously Terence Young, who really brings a real sort of well, I don't what's a good word to describe it? A kind of a sense of sort of a gentlemanly, British gentlemanly type of effervescence that was really essential in creating, I think, what is the paradoxical dynamism of Sean Connery's performance, right? Because Sean Connery is this very rugged, physically tough guy, but Terence Young puts him in these tailored suits, Savile Row suits and shirts, and this wonderful dress, and a smooth, gentlemanly type of walk, and an air about him, and he knows his food, and he knows what he knows, right? And so there is this wonderful mix of a sort of eclectic type of British cool style on the one hand, and then the rugged physical strength on the other. And I think that is further made, what's the phrase? That is further augmented by the fact that this is Sean Connery, who is being given these traits and being supported by Terence Young, but also he has this machismo that is also very much a part of his personality, and his voice and his accent, I think, adds to this really interesting hybrid, if you will, of all these seemingly different senses or different traits or elements, but it comes together really quite brilliantly. And so Bond ultimately becomes, in the hands of Terence Young, almost like a walking paradox. And I think that adds to the success of the characterization, at least provided by Sean Connery, in that really we don't quite know what to expect from him. Because he is this walking paradox. And he is also, I think, in a very broad sense, he is all things to all people, or he has a little bit for everyone. And I think that kind of, I mean, he has funny, sort of sarcastic humor. He's handsome. He has sex appeal. There's also a toughness to him. There's also this, Savile Row suits. I mean, there's this whole kind of culture that is built around Bond, and people buy the suits or they buy the shirts because Bond wore them. They go try to get the Rolex Submariner or something because Bond wore the Rolex Submariner or something like that. And so there is this culture that is built around wearing the things Bond wore in films, or having the same look that Bond did, because that's all part of the package, right? And we understand this. It's all part of it's extended towards the Britishness, if you will, of Bond as a brand that promotes all things British. And so it becomes a really interesting, as I say, a characterized paradox, so a living, breathing paradox in the form of Sean Connery. And I think that's ultimately quite brilliant. And the way that Terence Young was able to fashion this is, I think, it cannot be emphasized enough. And I think it's been noted by many other James Bond experts, much more expert than I, but I will sing along with the chorus and say that I think that had Terrence Young not directed this film and then the subsequent film, I don't think we would have had the same kind of series that we have today in terms of its sustainability and its longevity going forward, because there is something quite appealing, at least from my point of view. You know, I'm not British, I don't live in Britain, but I do have certain affinities and fondness for British culture. And so, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, you know, whether people in Britain like it or not, and I think that can be a question for another day, of course, but regardless, it is still something that people from all over the world watch when they watch Bond films, and Dr. No is included in that. And so even when he's confronted, when he meets Felix Leiter for the first time, you know, where'd you get this suit, right? And he's, you know, where'd you get this tailor, right? And he says, you know, from my tailor in Savile Row, and he's trying to clean up his tie there. And so this is all part of the package, and I think this stems in large part from Terrence Young. I would note that we see little bits of, I don't want to call them fashion faux pas necessarily, but for instance, there are some aspects of Bond's fashion that I think turn into sort of interesting corners when we have films that aren't directed by Terrence Young. For instance, when Guy Hamilton directs Bond in Goldfinger, there's a moment when Bond is in the office with them, and he's wearing a country suit. It's not a town suit, but it's a suit for the country, I think. It's a brown suit, I think. I'll save this for the Goldfinger discussion, but my point is that it seems like Terrence Young really knew the fashion rules, as it were, in terms of what to wear in the town versus what to wear in the country. I think there's a point in You Only Live Twice where Bond wears two-tone shoes, and I'm not sure if James Bond, as directed by Terrence Young, would have worn two-tone shoes when he's walking about in the city. But my point in bringing these up is that these are even the little details that we see shine through in Terrence Young's directed Bond films, and they're just a couple of many other possible examples as to how important Terrence Young is in the construction of the James Bond character that we know to this day, and it's carried through to this day. There have been some changes, of course, but it's still carried through to this day, I think, quite remarkably. So, and so it's essential. Terrence Young and Sean Connery, absolutely essential. But anyway, let's see. Mainly Movies says, this one certainly helps to establish many of the repeated Bond-isms that become expected moments and lines in the later films. Once again, you say something that I tried to say earlier in the live chat, but you say it much better than I do. Mainly Movies, thank you so much. And you've got to check out Mainly Movies channel. She is great. She is currently still going through the James Bond films on her channel. Mainly Movies. Check it out right now. It's a fantastic channel, and we will talk again soon. Thank you so much for that. Let's see. Wolfgrat says, and of course there are other spy movies such as, oh yes, and then you mentioned other spy movies here as well. This is just scrolling down here. Sorry about this. Okay, here we go. Sorry. I always do this. I am such a... okay, now I'm back to the chat. Let's see. Just skipping over a few comments here. Okay. Wolfgrat says, this is good. Wolfgrat says, I admire Wiseman, you're referring to Joseph Wiseman, a lot, who plays Dr. No. But yes, there was no predicting what his ethnicity might be in the next film. So this is an interesting point that you bring up about Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No. So, okay, I'll use this to try to talk about two broad topics. So first is the villain, Dr. No, and how he is portrayed in this film. I think that this is really one of the more interesting ways that a main villain in a James Bond film is being portrayed, because Dr. No doesn't physically appear in the film except for a little bit. So much so that he really is a secondary character. because of the relatively short amount of screen time that is afforded to him actually on screen, right? And so, which is fascinating. But people talk about him. The film is named after him, and so he is ultimately a huge, huge presence. Even though, excuse me, excuse me, sorry about that. He is a huge, huge presence, Dr. No, even though he doesn't appear for that much amount of screen time. And I like that build-up, and I like that he is given this huge stature, not just because people mention him, but because obviously there are so many people who are afraid of him. Even someone like Professor Dent is really noticeably afraid, and is willing to do anything if it means following the orders of Dr. No, because the implication is that Dr. No is very, very dangerous, and he does not appreciate even a whiff of what might seem to be insubordination, even though the people who work under him are still trying to follow his orders as best as they can. But they are dealing with Bond after all, and so the plans often get thwarted, do they not? But my point is that, of course, the threat and menace of Dr. No and the myth of Dr. No is built up even further during the film by the fact that he is mentioned a lot, but also by how we see other characters react to the possibility of what might happen to them if Dr. No finds out that they failed. And so this builds up Dr. No's myth even more, and I find that to be, it can be very risky when this plays out in any film performance, because what that means is that either all this buildup happens throughout 2/3 of the film, maybe even more, then we see Dr. No, we see the villain who's been built up so much, and he or she can either succeed in really satisfying this myth that has been built up throughout most of the film before, or he or she can fail because for whatever reason the performance doesn't live up to the expectations that have been built up in our minds throughout most of the film's running time. Okay, but for Joseph Wiseman's Dr. No, I think he lives up to the expectations that have been built up around him and then some, because of his what he does with it, which is quite striking, at least for most of the performance. Most of the performance, Joseph Wiseman, of course, chooses to go very soft and very quiet and very slow, which is an interesting choice because it also shows a kind of he's exuding an icy cool confidence, not dissimilar to the way that Sean Connery's James Bond exudes this cool, still type of confidence. And so I don't know if this has been, a lot has been made in James Bond films where James Bond and the villain seem to mirror each other. And I think there's a lot to be said about James Bond and Dr. No. It's not a perfect mirroring, of course, I understand that, but there is some level of mirroring going on. And I think one of those aspects of mirroring that I think is successful is the physical attributes of Dr. No and his stillness versus Sean Connery's James Bond. He's not like this all the time, I know, but there are some moments when he is very still and very composed, much like Dr. No is very still and very composed, at least during their first interaction, during their meal together. So there's that, and I think that adds further dimension, therefore, to the performance by Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No, and it makes him even more of a threatening menace that is even made more menacing, of course, by his physical trait of having these metal hands that can crush, that are super strong, etc. So there is this real extra added sense of super villainy, which is again paralleled or mirrored to a certain degree by Sean Connery's performances as James Bond. So this integration that we have is really quite brilliant, and as I say, it just further helps to support and lift the performance by Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No. And then, of course, this demeanor does crack at the very end when the plan, the toppling of this missile launch does not go according to plan because of James Bond's intervention. And so we see a little bit of the, I don't want to call it vulnerability, but let's call it a sudden rush of frustration when Dr. No rises from his control panel and rushes over to the platform and really goes at it and really tries to confront him, Bond that is, with physical force in terms of the using his arms and then doing the final fight before he succumbs. It is his strength that is his ultimate weakness, right? Because it's his strength of the metal hands that is unable to save the day because he's unable to grab onto the metal support beams when he most needs it, right? And that causes his ultimate demise. And so his strength is his ultimate weakness. But my point is that during this moment, it is a moment of a sudden rush of not panic, but maybe rage against Bond. And so this is almost like that kind of crack of vulnerability that I was suggesting that we saw in Sean Connery's performance throughout the film Dr. No. And so I'd like to think that this is yet another level of mirroring between hero and villain, Bond and Dr. No, which I think also adds to the further dimension and lifts the performance not just of Sean Connery, but also of Joseph Wiseman. So all in all, you don't need me to tell you anything new about the Dr. No performance, because I think all of it's been said by, as I say, many other people before me. And so I'm saying pretty much the same thing, which I think it's a great performance. I think it's fantastic. Even the voice, right? The first time we hear Dr. No's voice is when Professor Dent visits the base, and we have the domed ceiling and the delivery of the spider, right? Pick it up, pick it up. And the use of the voice, still cold, calm, and yet very menacing. And so that adds further chilling, a further chilling nature to it. And there is something also about the introduction of a character, or the first time that we not see the character, but we hear the voice of the character, especially a character that has been built up so much so far. We just hear the voice, and that builds the character up even more. And I always find that kind of introduction of a villain by layer, if you will, not everything at once, but a little bit at a time, I think adds to the further menace. We will, of course, see this pattern of the introduction of a character layer by layer played out through the other films, I think, regarding the character of Blofeld. But that'll be a conversation for another day. But the point I wanted to bring up is that in many respects, the way that Dr. No emerges in this film in layers, if you will, is almost akin to how Blofeld, the character, is slowly introduced throughout the films until until we see what the character is about. And so I always thought that Dr. No was almost like a kind of a blueprint, if you will, for the Blofeld character that we would see carried over throughout many films in the later Sean Connery years. So in that way also, this film is yet another template or blueprint, not just for the heroes, but also for the way that the villains are portrayed in later films. So that's an interesting point, I think. But now we have to come to an aspect of the film that I think really I can't ignore, which is the depiction of sort of ethnicities in this film. And it comes in two broad categories. First is the depiction of the people in Jamaica and Quarrel and Bond's treatment of Quarrel, not all the time, but sometimes. And then also the other grouping is the depiction of what we understand to be either people of Asian ethnicity or mixed ethnicity, because we understand that Dr. No as a character is a character of mixed ethnicity, Asian and European ethnicities. And so and he says so himself. And also, if you know the book, if you've read the book, you know that this is his backstory. And so, but there are other Asian characters, and one I've been asked sometimes, how do I feel about the depiction of the Asian characters in this film, and is it offensive to me or anything of that nature? And the answer to that question, at least from my point of view, is I don't consider the depictions of, let's say, the characters of Asian ethnicity or seeming Asian ethnicity, because we don't really get the backstory for many of the other characters, like Miss Taro, for instance. But my what was I saying? So yes, so I don't get offended by it, but I do want to point out just that it is something that I would be lying if I said I'm completely okay with it. Let me put it that way. And what I mean is that I always find it, let's say, I do admit to having some level of discomfort whenever I see someone who is not of Asian descent playing a character that is of Asian descent, and this is made further apparent by the application of some kind of makeup appliance or something like that. So I do have that general approach, and of course it depends on the film, and that doesn't necessarily destroy my overall ability to enjoy a particular film. I just see it as one aspect of the film. Of course, if it's played out in an overt or overly offensive way or something like that, then I will probably take issue with the film. But again, it's a case-by-case basis. And on that case-by-case basis, I look at this film, Dr. No, and I see it as being I see the Miss Taro character as being peculiar. Again, we don't know the character's backstory. Maybe she is also, for instance, of mixed ethnicity, just like Dr. No is of mixed ethnicity. And in fact, I think this type of mixed ethnicity backstory for Dr. No could help to make this depiction of a character who is of a half Asian ancestry. It could help to accept the character of the actor of Joseph Wiseman playing Dr. No. It certainly, I think it because it's part of the backstory, and so therefore it is. I don't want to say okay, but it might be deemed maybe more forgiving, for lack of a better phrase, that Joseph Wiseman is playing a character who is at least of part Asian descent, right? Because then that would mean that, well, anyway, that's what I'm trying to get at. And so I think the backstory oftentimes helps to explain why certain casting decisions might be made. And while they might not necessarily be the most perfect casting decisions, again, context helps, and backstory is part of that context. And so we get a little bit of that with Dr. No and Joseph Wiseman. So I admit to not necessarily feeling any kind of feelings of being offended about that. And I don't necessarily feel the same levels with Miss Taro either, but I do think that we don't get her backstory. And also, the name Taro, it does, I'm not sure if it's, I'm not sure what that name is. I mean, for instance, in Japanese, the word Taro is not necessarily a last name. At least I've never met anyone who's Japanese that has the last name of Taro. It's usually like a first name, and it's usually a male's first name. It's a kind of a common first name. It's probably akin to the name, like, I don't know, John or James or something like that. But my point is that there isn't a backstory, enough backstory to give us more information about who she is, where she came from, etc. But at the same time, she is a very minor character. And so I think she's not inconsequential, of course, but she is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. And so I don't attach so much not importance, but I don't attach so much to the role such that even if I were really offended by it, I don't think it would affect my overall feelings towards the film and my viewing experience of the film. I don't know if that makes any sense. And I would say also that there are other depictions, there are other characters who are of Asian ethnicity. For instance, the sisters. Remember when Bond enters the lair of Dr. No for the first time and he meets the sisters, right? And they're introducing him to the room and things of that nature. What's interesting is that there is no, at least my ear does not identify any kind of purposeful depiction of these two characters, these two Asian women who are working in Dr. No's lair. There is no, I can't detect any, what's the phrase, any kind of that kind of accent. You know, there's a sort of a very, sometimes we see stereotypical depictions of Asian accents when we have Asian characters speaking English. And so I find those, I really don't like those accents at all. But we don't see that kind of accent being applied in these particular characters. At least I can't detect that kind of accent. And so this is to say that I don't consider this film to be offensive because I don't necessarily see it as fully embracing overt Asian stereotypes. Now, is it perfect? I'm not sure if it is perfect. Again, there's this whole issue of casting. But overall, I'm not, it doesn't deter me from my overall enjoyment of the film. I don't know if that makes any sense. There are other depictions, though. For instance, when James Bond and Quarrel, their relationship, it does reach points where it does become quite uncomfortable. And I would have preferred if James Bond had a much more agreeable air as a character, and much more. If I would have preferred if he showed a little bit more respect towards the character of Quarrel, who is really working hard for everyone's interests, and he just says right on the beach at Crab Key, right? He says, "Fetch my shoes" or something like that. And I know it's kind of a throwaway. It's a throwaway line, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, it does. As we're getting more and more away from 1962, I think these sorts of moments, I think potentially anyway, do show a real kind of insensitivity. Now, could that be inherent in the Bond character himself? I think there's a lot to be said about that, and I don't think the film is necessarily meaning to portray the Bond character as being a wholly perfect one, and so I think there is room for that kind of understanding. I'm not sure, and it's not overtly played out, but I do want to just emphasize that there is that kind of element there, and we will see these types of elements, of course, play out. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but there are other films in the James Bond series that I think are actually a little bit more offensive to me than Dr. No. I still enjoy them very much, but there are moments, for instance, in You Only Live Twice that I think are quite questionable, to be perfectly honest. There's actually from my point of view, there's a real questionable kind of narrative turn in the film Die Another Day. This is the Pierce Brosnan film Die Another Day, and so there's actually a moment that I'm still not comfortable with at all. But going back to Dr. No, I think it even if it's not perfect, I think it doesn't, at least for me anyway, it doesn't intrude upon my ability to still engage with the film and still enjoy it for what it is, which is an entertaining 007 adventure. So, that's what I wanted to say. And again, I should say one other thing before I go to the live chat, which is just because I might feel a certain way, even to the smallest degree, just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean that I have any kind of animosity towards anyone who might really enjoy this film or any other film that I might consider to be offensive to my being for whatever reason. I never think of it that way at all, because I know that we each approach a film in a different way in our own unique viewpoints. And sometimes it's this idea of sort of the existential issues, right? We see it through our own lenses, but we aren't always able to see it through the lenses of others. And it's impossible because we can't live in the viewpoint of others, and I understand that, and so there's no way that I ever want to impose any expectation upon you or upon anyone else that you have to think the same way that I do. No, not at all, not at all. And so I would never be offended if you felt a certain way about a film that I had certain feelings about. So, and the same is true for a film like Dr. No. So, it's all about subjectivity, I think, and it's all about how we express that subjectivity as well in our day-to-day conversations. And so. If I were to sense something about a conversation that maybe took an ugly turn directed towards me, then that would be a different case entirely, of course. But in terms of our experiences vis-a-vis film, I think there is much room for conversation. So I hope that's clear. But anyway, let's see here. Going back to the live chat, here we have Timothy. Timothy's a greeting from Barbados, Daisuke. So hello. Che Guevara 9 says is here. Hi Daisuke, sorry I've just been so busy lately. I want you to know that even though I can't always make it to your live streams, I will always rewind them up and enjoy them thoroughly. Thank you. No, thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you. Rachel, the Music Man VC, my dear friend. It's always nice to see you. It's always nice to see you, my friend. Love Dr. No, you say, in for the show. And then Che Guevara 9, you say, I wish you and your family all the best. Well, thank you very much. Likewise, my friend, I hope you are well. Stephen Shreif is here. Hello from Lebanon, dear friends. Hello, Stephen. It's nice to see you. And Rachel, you continue. A top 5 Bond for me too. Well, this is interesting. So for a lot of people, Rachel, a lot of people here seem to be sharing the same sentiment that you have, which is that this is a top 5 Bond for a number of people here, as well as yourself. So that's great. Gloin, Timothy says, saw the film yesterday. And Gloin says, Dr. No looks like Austin Powers' Dr. Evil. $1 million, Mr. Bond. You were wondering what it cost. Yes. Yes. And then Rachel, you continue. Connery is fantastic in this film. Bond, James Bond. Boom. Film history with 3 words. Yes. Zyrother says, I love the version of the song Three Blind Mice at the beginning. Yes, thank you very much. And this reminds me, before I continue, I should say that this music is also really quite interesting. And I mentioned earlier in the live chat live stream about how I considered Terrence Young and Sean Connery's depiction of James Bond in the personage of Sean Connery to be like a walking paradox, because there's all these little maybe disparate elements seeming to come together into one being that was Sean Connery's James Bond. Well, I think this film, Dr. No, is also, at least in terms of its musical palette, it's really quite interesting and remarkable. There is, of course, the songs that are employed, Three Blind Mice, and this is also exemplified in the opening titles with the crash of the what is now is the famous James Bond theme, and then we have the drums, which leads into sort of the second part of this title sequence, the Morris Binder design title sequence, and the silhouettes of the dancers, and then followed by the intro into the Three Blind Mice song, and then leading into the silhouettes of what we understand are the three blind men, but we understand later in the film that they're anything but. They're in fact killers, assassins, a very deadly group of assassins. And so that's just a way to say that the musical palette, I think, is really quite disparate, and it really adds a sense of I don't want to say unease, but it I don't know about you, but I think the music is great, don't get me wrong, but there's a sense of it not necessarily it seems to go in a lot of different places, I think quite triumphantly so, but it does so in a way that almost puts me on edge when I see the film, and I can never quite relax into a groove, if that makes any sense. That, I think, is quite a good effect. Don't get me wrong. I think as a kind of psychological effect on me when I'm watching the film, I think, oh, this is something, I like this kind of music, and then I listen to a different type of music, and then I listen to this type of, and it all seems to be like, what's going on here? I can't really get my bearings, sort of thing. And I think that adds a certain sense of, maybe unease is too strong a word, but for lack of a better phrase, unease, because it means that I can't quite settle in. And I think that's good in terms of, as I say, keeping the mystery element and the suspense element alive. At least, again, let me use the word that I used before, subconsciously, on a subconscious level. And then we have that triumphant, almost marching band parade type of swelling music that comes in at the very end when Felix Leiter comes with the troops here, and I like it. It almost sounds like a Superman theme when Ursula Andress stands up in the boat with one knee on there, and it almost sounds like da da da. So I always thought that, oh, Ursula Andress as Honey Rider is like Superman or something, but that's an interesting little. I mean, the music is really interesting too. I mean, it's sometimes it's a little bit off. The of course in the one of the most exciting songs, the Jump Up, the band singer and the song isn't quite synced up, and I always found that that's another little thing that I love the song and I love the little sequence, but it's a little bit, it just puts me, it's a little bit off kilter. It just puts me on edge for some reason. I think it's that little bit where we can see his lips not moving, and then we see him go to the mic, or the song is already playing, and so that's those little moments that I think add a sense of unease, and a really good sense of unease too. And I think the music has a lot to do with it. Not to mention, of course, the fact that the introduction of the theme, the very famous theme that we will hear time and time again for good cause, because it's an excellent theme. It's one of the most iconic theme tunes in cinema history for good reason. So we get the start of it here. And speaking of unease, before I get to the live chat, I should also mention, along with the music, there's also the editing. The Peter Hunt editing, and the editing is such that sometimes we see edits within the same shot, which also, it's almost very jarring. For instance, when the Strangway's secretary is shot by one of the three blind men, we see her turn to one of the men in the window, and then suddenly it's a quick cut, but it's the same shot, and then she falls to the ground. Similar kind of editing technique happens when Bond and the police are inspecting the Strangway's house, and Bond finds the picture, and it's a picture, and we find out later that it's a picture of Quarrel, and he's asking, "Oh, who's this person in the picture?" And it just cuts again. And it's still Bond standing in the same place, but it's a cut in the middle of this particular shot, and so that also adds a sense of unease and almost a subconscious level disturbance, if you will, and that adds again to the overall effect of being off kilter or being rough around the edges. But that really helps in terms of the psychological impact that is made on the viewer. It's certainly done so when I watch it, and I think we can thank the musical application, also the editing application as well. Really great stuff. But anyway, so let's see here. So going on, let's see, just scrolling down here. If I skip over your comment, I apologize. Oh, and before I forget, I'll go to the comment. There's one other detail. There's the bit where the three blind men, the assassins, find Bond at night when Bond is about to enter the hotel, and they're they're in the distance in the parking lot or something, and we hear the suspenseful music, da 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 da, and then one of them has the gun fixed on Bond, and it's he's about to fire, and it's this huge moment, and suddenly a flash of light or a car or something disturbs them, and then it's too late because Bond has already gone in, and there's a moment where it's like the assassin is just he's just so like down and dejected that the other guy kind of has to. I mean, it's a really. I don't. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I almost feel like the other guy is saying, "Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry." It's just really trying to lift his spirits, because obviously the assassin is really disappointed in himself. Maybe he's really scared because he knows that if he didn't succeed, then Dr. No will really have it in for him. But I love that little moment. It's a really kind of human moment among the assassins. But then, of course, when we see them later, we understand that they were on their way to a funeral, as Bond so aptly puts. But let's see here. Okay. Timothy says, seen it many times. I like it a lot. Bond is much tougher here. He is nigh unstoppable. Cine Arts. It's nice to see you. I will be in touch about that thing. So I will be in touch with you, my friend. Thank you for stopping by. I love this film, you say. Connery is perfect, and I think it's one of the best Bond films personally. Truly epic. Hope you're well today. Oh, that's great. What a great. And let's see. Timothy says exactly what I meant. Rachel says, agree, Cine Arts. Timothy says charisma that Daniel Craig does not have. Okay, we will get to Daniel Craig 2 weeks from now with Casino Royale. I have many things to say about Daniel Craig's performance. And I not to give too much away now, but I do think it really depends on the film. I think I like the performance in some films better than others, but that's true, I think, for many of the other actors as well. And that's not always on the actor as well. It's just it's a lot to do with the material and the story at the moment, etc. But again, that'll be something to save for another live stream. Let's see. Rachel continues. Connery is my favorite. Connery is my childhood Bond, and as a result, my favorite. I'm dating myself. No, not at all, my friend. Many people share the same sentiment. So, let's see. David Jones says, Connery played Bond with a great balance of smooth charisma and deadly cutthroat execution. Yes, yet another one. Rachel, Zyrother, mainly movies. David Jones now, Wolfgratz, and many others. You are saying exactly what I want to say in this live stream, and yet you're saying it much better than I. Thank you so much. Chance Hutchison with a super chat. My goodness. Canadian $5, is that right? Thank you. Wow, completely unnecessary, my friend. You didn't have to do that, but the fact that you did, I'm very touched, very humbled. Thank you so much. Really, thank you so much for this. You say, thanks for doing what you do, Daisuke. Love your channel, and thank you for sharing your knowledge of film and recommends to the public. No, not at all, my friend. You are way too kind. I'm very moved. I wish I knew more than I did, because I don't know much of anything. And so, thank you so much for this. Still, really, I consider myself very, very fortunate to have been able to meet many, many nice people through this YouTube thing. So, Chance, let's talk again, and we will talk about cinema and life. It'll be my pleasure to do so, my friend. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. And Wolfgratz says, well, that's not always true, Rachel. I'm a fourth Doctor Man person. Okay, we're going to get into Doctor Who territory. So I'm going to, if I start down that path, I won't end. So, yeah. Dare I say it? Dare I say it? Harry Sullivan is an imbecile. Anyway, I'm going to stop. Okay. Timothy says Bond should have charisma just as pepper should have sting. Again, you say it much better than I. Timothy, thank you very much for that. Let's see. Yes, Rachel says, I understand Wolfkratz is Tom Baker number 4. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll just say one more and that's it. It's not quite it's a more modern reference, but I'll just say, who knows, eh? Who knows? Okay, that's it. So let's see. Wolfkratz says, well, Dent was useless and a potential nuisance. It's a very Matt Helm moment. Yes, okay. I think, Professor Dent, as a character, I think, he's not necessarily henchman level, but he does have, there is a kind of almost urgency about him that makes him very desperate. And I think characters that are desperate, I think, can ultimately prove to be the riskiest. And I think there was a moment, especially at the scene where Bond has the gun on him, where we can really sense his desperation, such that I think he would be willing to do anything. And he really was. He was willing to just go for the gun rather than surrender. And I think, fortunately for Bond, he ran out of ammunition. But had he not shot all the bullets, then of course it would be a completely different story. But it's an interesting moment too. And again, I would suggest too that that's a moment that I think in any other Bond film, nothing against the other Bond films, as I say, I love the other Bond films, but I think in any other Bond film that came later, I think that moment between Bond and Dent, Professor Dent, would have been played out more in terms of maybe fights between Dent and Bond, or maybe Dent brought some henchmen and maybe the henchmen fought Bond before Bond finally made it to Professor Dent, or something like that. There would have been, I would suggest, there probably would have been much more in terms of an action set piece stunt extravaganza or something. But as it turns out here, in a more quieter turn, we just have Dent going in there with the gun and then walking in and then dropping the gun. And then we have Bond, who, his game of solitaire was interrupted, right? But it is a much quieter affair, and I think it adds to the overall style of the film, Dr. No. Again, going to my, I don't want to call it thesis necessarily, but going to my opening statements of the film at the outset of this live stream, right? On the one hand, it is a film that is that has a lot of continuity with the other Bond films, but at the same time, it is a film that is unique and wholly its own entity, apart from the Bond films. And I think other people in the live chat, as Irother and others, I think have mentioned a same kind of viewpoint. So I think that's an example of that. So, right, and Timothy says, yes, Smith & Wesson, you've had your 6, yes. You say is an excellent piece of dialogue. I agree. I absolutely agree. It's such a perfect way to say it, too. It's a perfect way to explain information. Right, because I don't think many people would necessarily know that, right? Not everyone is knowledgeable about firearms, and so but it's perfect, right? It's such a perfect way. It gives the information about the firearm, and also is done in a very clever way and very short and to the point. Perfect line of dialogue. You're absolutely right. Let's see, just skipping the. Just scrolling down here. Chandan is here. Hello. Rob Wallace, your greetings from India, you say. Good evening to all. Hope you guys are well. Yes, thank you. And likewise, my friend, I hope you are well. Let's see. Mainly Movies says, Daisuke, it's interesting how the relationship between Bond and M shifts through the different Bond eras. I agree. There is a... here in Dr. No, it does feel slightly more antagonistic. M doesn't seem to have much time for Bond. That could be on account of the fact that they are meeting late at night. And it's kind of an emergency meeting. So maybe that is adding or affecting M's mood. Who knows? But yeah, I agree with your observation, Mainly Movies. I agree with it 100%. Let's see. Michael, Kiron says, Hi Daisuke, sadly I cannot stay for long. but wanted to give some quick thoughts on the film. Perfect first film for the franchise. I love the pace and how simple it is in comparison to the other films. Again, you said it well said, much better than I said. Yes, Wolfgratz. Mary Trueblood is, I think, the assistant who unfortunately gets it. You're talking about Strangways. Okay, let's see. And then Michael continues, Connery is fantastic straight out of the gate, and Jack Lord as Felix Leiter is one of my favorite Felixes. Dr. No is a great villain, and I just love how straightforward the movie is. Hope you're well. Thank you very much for that. And there's a great moment where Bond arrives in the airport, and the James Bond theme kicks in right when Jones, the driver, walks on screen, and he looks menacing, and then it suddenly cuts to Jack Lord's Felix Leiter folding the newspaper as the music goes da da da. Right, I love that. It's the ultimate James Bond moment in music. And what do we see? Jones walking into the frame, and then Felix Leiter folding his newspaper. Wow, what a great way to apply that music. Peter Hunt and company, fantastic. Let's see. Oh, and I love how Jack Lord says the name. He says the name, just his name, Dr. No. I love that so much. Such a perfect way, again, adding more emphasis and building up the character of Dr. No just by the way that characters say the name Dr. No. And I love the bit where the guys take the file out of the filing cabinet after they've killed the secretary at the beginning, and it's the music that swells up, dun 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 dun, and then it just does that theme, dun 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 dun, and then it's Crab Key, and then dun, and then the final crash is dun, Dr. No, right? So, and I think if I remember correctly, the name it wasn't like a full name. It wasn't like, what's his, I mean, if you've read the book, you know that he has a full name, but it's just Dr. No. So that's an interesting way to label files. I mean, if I were labeling files, I would think, I probably should have something that's like a label with maybe the full name of the person and maybe the location. So, but it's just in white lettering, Dr. No. So anyway, that's an interesting way to arrange files. But oh well. Let's see. Okay, so just scrolling down. Sorry about this. I've lost my place again. All right. Okay. Sorry about this. This shows again how terrible I am with my computer and technology in general. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling down here. Zyrother says, apparently Time magazine, when the film first released, called Connery, quote, a great big hairy marshmallow who almost always manages to seem slightly silly. He does have that the hair, the body hair, which we see when he is shirtless on Crab Key after having met Honey Rider, and that's in it. Let me, before I continue, I should mention also Ursula Andress in this role of Honey Rider, I think, is such an interesting. This is another example of a character that we don't see until much of the film has already expired. And so, but there hasn't been, unlike Dr. No, there hasn't been any kind of build-up of the character of Honey Rider. She just suddenly appears out of nowhere, again, like a goddess who emerges from the sea. And that, I think, is the way that many people saw Honey Rider and Ursula Andress when they first saw this film. And it's a striking entrance, is it not? It's one of the most striking entrances in any Bond film. And so I think it's even made more striking by the fact that it comes out of nowhere, which is an interesting sort of opposite approach, right? Because unlike Dr. No, his entrance is also very striking too, but it's striking by virtue of the fact, I think, in primary part, in how well and how menacingly his character has been so built up meticulously since the get-go until that final act of the film. Whereas Honey Rider, we don't hear anything, right? We never hear anything about Honey Rider's character until suddenly she appears, and it's still quite an effective entrance. And so I always like those. I mean, it's just, again, different approaches. The characters are different, of course. Their looks, their demeanors, their functions in the narrative, of course, are very different. I get that. But again, it's in a very maybe on a macro level, perhaps. Again, it just shows a kind of how this film is in many ways, it's a living, breathing paradox of a film, because it has different ways of dealing with different characters, but still it all works in a very unified way, quite beautifully, in my opinion. And I think Honey Rider's introduction is part of that, and her character is quite unique. She has a certain, I like that mix of how she seems naive, and she's also telling Bond about some pretty horrific stuff that happened to her. Right, the implication is that she was raped or sexually assaulted, and that she got back at the attacker with a poisonous spider. It took him a whole week to die, right? And so. And she also has this maybe naive naivete, which Bond might attribute as being maybe even a lack of education, right? But she is also a woman who, in other arenas, knows more than Bond, right? She knows more than Bond enough to be able to get rid of the mosquitoes, right? When they're going through the swamps or the canals or the waters of Crab Key. And she also knows exactly what to do when they are in the wild or in the wilderness, so to speak. So she is not I want to suggest is that I think her character is so interesting also by the fact that she is not a completely helpless character. Of course, there are moments where Bond has to rescue her, right? When she is chained up there in one of the rooms of Dr. No's lair. Of course, Bond has to come to the rescue, of course, and we understand this. This is part of the way in which these films, the Bond films, especially in the early part of the 60s, these were constructed this way. But still, there was room in the Honey Rider performance to suggest that she had a kind of intelligence about her, and she knew what to do in certain situations, and she wasn't afraid, and she knew when to strike back. And we see this also in her reaction when they are dining with Dr. No. And yet she still had this sense of innocence or naivete, which I think is quite understandable, because this is a situation about being captured by Dr. No, meeting someone like James Bond, going into this huge thing of a lair. I mean, you know, I'm not Ursula Andress and I'm not Honey Rider, but if I was in a similar situation, I would probably react with much more panic than how she reacted. And so it's a really quite a memorable role, of course. But of course, many people have said this before me, and I know people feel the same. Incidentally, I love the moment where everything is just chaos. Everything's running amok at the end there, and everyone's escaping in Dr. No's lair. And then I love how Sean Connery or James Bond is just like in one of the corridors, and he just trips up one of the guys who's wearing the radioactivity hazmat suit. And he says, "Where's the girl I came in with? Where is she?" And then the guy's like, I don't know. And he just punches him. And I felt so bad for that guy, you know, because how, right? If he's in the suit, I would assume that maybe he doesn't know all the inner workings of who comes in and who leaves the layer, right? He's probably working with Dr. No in that huge Ken Adams set, right? So he probably doesn't know where a Honey Rider is. You probably should ask someone else. Probably ask one of the sisters who greeted you when you first entered the layer, right? Why ask this guy in the hazmat suit? He probably didn't know anything. But well, that's just the nature of the situation, I suppose. And it was a kind of a panicky moment because it was all the whole base was about to explode, right? But anyway, let's see. So just continuing on, and I will have to just start to wind down soon because it is approaching 1 a.m. where I am. So let's see. I know I go a little bit longer, but my voice is starting to give way here. So let's see. Let's scroll down the live chat and see what we have. Let's see. Mr. Liam, Mr. Thank you very much. Yes. First, right? So it's always good to see you, my friend. Marius Meyer here says, I loved that Dr. No is the secret by the, let's see, Dr. No is more like a monster hidden in the shadow. Yes. Let's see, Cinema Dave Media is here. Hello. Dr. No is one of my favorite Bond films. I'm so glad to see your live stream on this movie. Hope all is well. Yes. And I want to thank you again for our lovely conversation on Sidney Lumet. Speaking of Sean Connery. Yes, so we have to do that again, my friend. That was a lot of fun. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, Wolfcrats. I also like that Dr. Noah got his hand on a Goya. Yes. Let's see. Rachel says Dr. No appears to be the archetype for Han in Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see. Everyone agrees as well. Yes, excellent observation, as Timothy says. That is really an excellent observation. You have offended my family, and you've offended the Shaolin Temple. But that's a conversation for another day, too, especially for those who know the Criterion Collection and know something about what might get released by the Criterion Collection next week. But anyway, that'll be a video for another day. Great observation, though, Rachel, as always. Let's see. All right. Damn full idealistic crusader. Spencer's here. Hello. Yes. The ethnic concerns of the film have really come more into discussion in recent years. The practice of casting performers is not the same ethnic background is far more prevalent. And yes, I do appreciate that, but I've always felt uncomfortable with it, and the ethnic concerns of the film have only really come more into discussion recently. I would probably have worded it, I don't know if I worded it the same way. I would probably say, with great respect, of course, but I would say that, it's of course one thing to acknowledge this kind of, let's say, for lack of a better phrase, tradition, or this kind of way of working, especially during these years, and I totally get that. But I will also say that I can say from like anecdotal evidence that my parents, who are they're older than I, obviously. They had similar reactions to me when they first saw this film, and so maybe these feelings, although they might not have been discussed in some circles of fan communities back then, I don't know if that is necessarily the same as saying that no one thought about that, or that they are only emerging recently. Maybe they've been thought about, but maybe they're being talked about more in some circles recently. I would be more comfortable in describing it that way. But I completely understand what it is you are pointing out, and I understand the point completely. Let's see. Let's see here. All right, just scrolling down here. There's, yes, yeah, David Jones says SJW say no, no, no to Dr. No. And yeah, I don't want to belabor this point, but yeah, I, and I know you're not saying, I know you're not saying that I'm an SJW, so I know that's, I completely understand that, but I just want to be absolutely clear, just in case, that, you know, I don't see any overtly offensive aspect of this particular film. As I say, it's not perfect, but, and I don't claim to be, on the one hand, 100% okay with it, let me put it that way. But it's not enough for me to dislike this film. And I still like this film very, very much. And so, for the reasons that I tried to point out earlier in the live stream. But again, that is just my own approach, and that doesn't mean that even my little sense of feeling slightly discomfort, that doesn't mean that I want to dissuade anyone from feeling this, I don't know, you have to feel the same way that I do, because I don't claim that at all. But yeah, it is. Well, let me just leave it at that. So, but I completely understand what it is you're saying, my friend. So I completely get it. So, and I understand completely what you're saying. Let's see. So, all right. Just scrolling down here. Tecker FIFA says, my first live stream for Film Club. Hello, it's nice to see you. Welcome, welcome. Theodore's here. Hello. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, Damnful, I do. There's Crusader. You do bring up the line about the fetch my shoes. I don't know. I actually, again, I'm gonna have to. I understand what you're saying here, but it is. I think. I don't know if I don't know if I don't know if I describe it as being pounce, but I do think it's a reasonable line of discussion. Again, does it dominate the entire discussion? No, I don't think so. But it is still a reasonable line of discussion to have. And I don't think the line of discussion would necessarily amount, at least from my point of view, at least how I would describe it, as being necessarily pouncing on it. But it is something that is, for my money, something that is noticeable, let me put it that way. So, but as I say, it is one element of a film of many elements. So, so there we go. But I completely understand what you're saying too. I get it, and I think also there is also this aspect of I am not, as I've mentioned before, I am not necessarily a part of James Bond online fan communities, in the sense that I don't go to the forums or anything like that, so I don't necessarily know what it is that people say nowadays and the viewpoints, and so, you know, I don't know. But at the same time, I think it's part of the conversation, right? It's part of the conversation about what films are and how they age, and ebbs and flows, right? And if there are issues that have to be discussed, they can be discussed. But I'm not sure if those, as I say, I don't necessarily see this film as being so problematic that it deserves, for instance, the extreme example of being removed from circulation or anything like that. On the contrary, I think I think there's room for those sorts of discussions on the one hand, but still, I'm able, from my own vantage point, to enjoy the film very much, as I hope I've shown by having this live stream. I'm not blaming anyone, and I'm not suggesting that anyone has said something untoward. Not at all, not at all. But I just want to be absolutely clear that I do have a certain viewpoint based on my own experience and my own background, and it does alert me to some aspects of this film. It does, and it has for a long time. But still, I love this film very much, and I think I'd like to think that I'm trying to show how much I love this film by the very fact that I'm choosing to stay up at night when I could go to sleep and enjoy a long, restful sleep on my day off. But I'm choosing instead to stay up and talk about this film because I really love the film. And so, even with areas that, as I say, might not necessarily fill me with 100% comfort, still, it is a film that I really enjoy very much, and I do hope that it's shown by the fact, at the very least, that I am doing this live stream. So because I do enjoy the film very much, but anyway, it's let's see. All right. But I'm probably gonna not gonna talk more about that. I've said all I want to say about that. So let's see. Eric Jansen is here. So it's nice to see you, my friends. Thank you. Let's see. Talking about the difference between the books. Oh yes. Also, I forgot to mention that. Yes, I have read the book, but I on purpose didn't rely too much on like book and film comparisons for purposes of this particular live stream. And so, but yes, you're absolutely right in terms of differences. There are actually some really key differences that are made in the film adaptation, which I think make the book very interesting reading, but also illuminate how successful the film adaptation really was, because there are some aspects of the book, as you know, that probably would have translated quite difficult. It would have been very difficult to translate some aspects of the book onto screen. And so I think they did a really excellent job considering the source material, which is still quite excellent. So let's see. All right. Just scrolling down, and let's see. Looks like a great conversation had by all. That's excellent. Let's see. Great. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the live chat here. I know it's not so compelling live streaming for me to just be sitting here silently reading, but I'm just so caught up in the conversation. So please forgive me. But let's see. Oh yes. So Raymond Rodriguez is here. Yes. Hello, my friend. Jack Lord will always be known for Hawaii Five-0 more than anything, and I do love Connery. But for some reason, I had more fun with the more Bond films. Could be because I was born in '69. Okay, yeah, I mean, right, to each his or her own, right? Because I think there is a lot to be said about the generational appreciation of the various Bond films. And, you know, I also like Roger Moore very much. So, and also there's something to be said also about, you know, liking one Bond one Bond performer doesn't necessarily preclude right, liking others, right? You can always, I mean, the human mind is such a wonderfully complex machine that one can have you know, different feelings and hold the same feelings at the same time, and it's wonderful. That doesn't, it's not, I mean, that's not always the case for everything, of course, but I think it's certainly possible with respect to James Bond films, that's for sure. So I completely get what you're saying. Fantastic comment. Let's see. Wolfgrat says, yeah, no one mentioned Miss Ryder. I just did, in fact, but you're right. I mentioned it rather late, but I hope that was okay. Let's see. Again. Oh, sorry about this. Okay. Again, sorry for this less than compelling live streaming presence that I exude due to the fact that I am so absorbed by the live chat. I would read it out line for line, but my voice is starting to give way, and so I am. Let's see. This is great. All right. Yes. There's discussion here about John Kitzmiller, right, who is the actor who played Quarrel. Let's see. Yes, he was a well-regarded actor, and he gives a really great performance here as Quarrel. Kevin O'Connell says, I would love to see you talk about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's my favorite. Well, I have. So you're more than welcome to check out that that live stream. It was the first one I did, I think, on the James Bond film. So you can find it somewhere on the channel if you like. I hope you enjoy it. So let's see. Tiberius Zool says, are you planning on a whole series rewatch? You mean, am I planning to watch the entire series again for purposes of the live stream? So yeah, so I've seen all the films. I've seen all the films for. I've seen all the films already many times, but yeah, I think before the live streams, for instance, for Doctor No, I just wanted to watch it again. So let's see. Yeah, so the next one is going to be Casino Royale. Yes, Wolfgratz, thank you. Thank you so much. It's like you read my mind, or it's like you know what I'm about to say before I say it. Thank you so much. So, yes, it's Casino Royale in 2 weeks, the Daniel Craig film Casino Royale, and it just worked out by kind of happenstance, really. At first, I started with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then I went to The Living Daylights, and then I realized that I dealt with two really debuts. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is, of course, still a debut, but then I went from Living Daylights by chance, which is also a debut film, and then now I decided, okay, I'll just stick with the debut films, and then we'll go from there. So now it's Doctor No, which is also a debut film. Okay, so okay, so I'm gonna just wind down the conversation here, because, as I say, it's I usually do this for 3 hours, but today I'm a little bit not under the weather, but my voice is giving way, so I'm gonna have to start to close the conversation here. I hope you don't mind, but and just say in conclusion, there are, I think, many other things that I could have said about this film, except and I'm not the perfect vehicle or messenger for this film, but I must say, and I must emphasize that this is a really splendid film. I must say that again. This is such a splendid film, and I always marvel at how well constructed this film is, how observant it is, and how it seems to present its story. And I love, as I say, it goes in different places. I mean, I've described it as being a quiet thriller in some places. I've described it as being a taut thriller. But, it is also, I do want to emphasize this, it is a film that I've also tried to describe it in certain aspects as being a walking type of paradox, because there are many things about it that seem disparate, and they seem to be connecting different things that shouldn't really add up. I mean, if we think about the whole construction of the film, it feels like really distinct acts that don't, right, and within those acts there are different things going on. The music seems to be, and I mean this positively as well, but at first glance it might seem somewhat haphazardly put together, but I think that's part of its charm. The fact that it pulls in all these different elements. It pulls in the story about, like, it has a clear beginning with the story of Jamaica, and then it goes into the exploration of Crab Key, and then it goes into Dr. No's lair, and then all the while we have characters that suddenly emerge out of nowhere with Honey Rider, and then other characters that are built up over time and then suddenly emerge from the shadows with Dr. No, and then we have characters that appear and disappear, little bits of spycraft that emerge and then disappear again, never to be seen, outside of that particular moment in the film. Music that seems to be of this kind of genre, that kind of genre, that seems to emerge and disappear at a whim of Peter Hunt's editing and music application. I didn't mention also the way that voice actors are used, and the fact that we're hearing voices that we, like, it seems like Nikki van der Zyl, the voice actor, seems to be everywhere. Right? So it's like this sort of, and the editing is fast paced and frenetic, even where nothing is going on. I mean, as I mentioned before, there's this huge editing jump. It's almost like a jump cut, almost imperceptible jump cut, when Bond is asking about a picture of Quarrel, right? And so these sorts of things on paper really shouldn't work, but they really do work. And I think they work all the more by the fact that they seem to be disparate elements that are being tied together by threads of the filmmakers in a very well-constructed way, or seemingly well-constructed way. That really also takes advantage of the rough edges, and it smooths them out, but also leaves them rough on the other hand. And I think this is no better exemplified than the performance of Sean Connery, which is a performance that is, as I tried to indicate before, has its rough edges, but also has its smooth corners, and he is a walking paradox of rugged physical toughness and menace, but also he's dressed in the best Savile Row suits and Turnbull Asser shirts, and he's got the cufflinks and the Dunhill lighter, and all the acumen and all the little trinkets, right, that make up the British gentleman. And so these kinds of differing poles or differing tones, not just within the confines or the construct of the character, but also in the context of the overall film itself, I think really lend to a sense of sort of freshness, if you will, and a sense of unexpected nature to the film. And also it lends an air of subconscious suspense and an air of subconscious menace that never dies down, even when the film reaches its moments of sort of seeming safety. Right, because there are, as I say, moments where there's just quiet, nothing going on, people talking in a room, Bond in a hotel room, no music, nothing, but still there is a kind of quiet unease that permeates the entire film. And I think that is at the heart of why I really cling to this film. And when I speak about this film, the way that I'm describing it, I'm listening to myself as I describe it, and I think this doesn't sound like a typical James Bond film, right? Because what we might understand to be a typical James Bond film in terms of the large set pieces and the fights and the action and the exotic locations and all that stuff. I mean, it's all here, right? Don't get me wrong, it's all here. But what seems to be, in my mind anyway, quite memorable about the film, surprisingly enough, isn't that stuff, but it's the stuff that makes it distinct from that stuff, right? And I find that to be absolutely amazing. I find that to be absolutely, that it has the keys or the ingredients that would make for quite successful Bond films in the future, but then it still had its own set of tools, as it were, that really made it distinct from everything that would come after this. And it still, to this day, holds such a unique place. Not only because it's the first Bond, it's the first official Bond film, right? The Broccoli Saltzman Bond film, right? It's not just because it's the first film, but also on its merits. On its merits, it really acts in a peculiar way as a starting point, as a template, but also acts in its own character. And I really admire the film very much for that. And I like, therefore, how it's still, and I think I'm sorry, let me just end this way. And I think in that way, it really has a nice way of aging. It's aged very, very well. As I say, not just because it's the first Bond film, but I think these elements, in an interesting way, give it a retro chic, and also allow us to sort of see that it's a kind of, I mean, it's been described here as being a film of its time for many reasons, and I agree with that 100%. But it also means that we are allowed to see it, and we're allowed to appreciate it for what it is, and the fact that it is a kind of a quieter film, but still with some interesting rough edges to it, I think helps to ground it. And I think that grounding, together with the elements of the commonality ingredients of Bond films that we'll see in later films, I think that combination really gives the film the ability to age really well, at least in my eyes anyway. I mean, not to mention the fact that it has great performances, great music, great look, great feel, a great story, and great set pieces, and a great beginning, middle, and end. And so, what more can you ask for, in a Bond film, or in any film in general, for that matter? And that is my general impression or feeling or comments with respect to this great film, Dr. No. Is it perfect? No film is perfect, of course, but even imperfections, I think, are cause for celebration, and I think they illuminate and they show us things. And I think even with imperfections in this film or in any other film, they provide room for discussion and room for further thought and consideration. And I think there's nothing I'd rather have more in a discussion of cinema than those sorts of potentially enriching discussions. So that is my general feeling on this film, Dr. No. So I will now go to the live chat, and then after that I will call it a night. So I will see here. Okay. Let's see. Sorry about this. So Casual Glutton, hello Casual Glutton, and you say, oh, I'm sorry, Timothy says, what do you think about Henry Cavill for the next Bond Daisuke? Will he have a mustache? No, I'm just kidding. So, I mean, it might work. I haven't really thought about it myself, but yeah, it might work. It'll be very interesting indeed. Although, well, actually, yeah, very interesting, I think. Interesting possibility. Casual Glutton says, would love to hear your thoughts on The Man with the Golden Gun. I've always loved that film, even though it's really silly and campy, but there is something special about it. I will talk about it hopefully in a future live stream. The plan is, if I can get to them, one live stream per Bond film. And so The Man with the Golden Gun is one that it's one that I like too, and I'm very happy to talk about it as well. Again, one day, but I do like it very much. Wolfgrat says, thanks Daisuke and others in chat. That was very interesting, including, of course, the bits we may differ about. Always a good sign that. I agree. I absolutely agree. There's nothing wrong with disagreement. You know, I always welcome it. Or at least well, I say I always welcome it. I should be more clear. I would like to think that I will welcome it. So, I mean, I admit sometimes I always have to sort of prepare myself whenever I receive a comment about that disagrees with something I say. But you know, I think that's natural, and I think it's very healthy for me. And at least I'm speaking from my own position. It's very healthy for me to encounter disagreement. Where was I? So yes, Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader Spencer says, Dr. No and From Russia with Love have an energy and an excitement that is the signature of the Young style, the Terrence Young style. Nothing else has ever been the same blend. Yes, and in fact, I would agree with you, even to the extent of Thunderball. Right? I mean, Thunderball was, of course, very different circumstances. We understand this, but even so, there's something really special, really special. I agree with you 100%. So special about the Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Terrence Young period. I mean, we've seen directors come and then go, and then they arrive again, right? And so I always think of Thunderball as being the second period, the second Terrence Young period, and we've seen that Guy Hamilton had a second period, Lewis Gilbert had a second period, and so. But I agree with you. I mean, I have a lot of great things to say about Thunderball too. I love that film, but there is just something so romantic, and there's a feeling of anything's possible. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's a feeling in the air when you watch those films that anything is possible. Like when I watched Dr. No, I feel like these are people that are thinking, I don't know if I'm going to do this again, right? I don't like they're probably thinking, am I going to make another film in this series? I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be successful, but you know, what the heck? Let's just do it and have fun. And they did, and they put together a film that is marvelous. And so, but there's this feeling of just, I don't know, it like either the sky's the limit or we have nothing to lose, so let's just have fun. There's that feeling of irreverence, or just of a kind of free style about it, and it's romantic as well, and it's also very, it feels that way, but it also has that sense of being assured and very confident. Excuse me. Very confident too, and so, excuse me, pardon me. I'm very sorry, very sorry. So that is that. Yeah, I agree with you completely, Spencer, about that. Absolutely. And you continue. I still think Nikki Van Der Zyl has one of the most beautiful voices ever. I don't mind that she's everywhere. Yes. What does she say? Well, I can repeat many of the lines that she says, but I would probably not do it justice. Well, I wouldn't do it justice because I have a voice that is terribly different, way too different from the beautiful voice that is Nikki Van Der Zyl. So I will spare you the horror of listening to my voice repeat the lines that were spoken by the one, the only Nikki Van Der Zyl. But there are many that I think are quite memorable. Let's see. Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader says, lastly, since I missed the opening, did you mention the Criterion Laserdisc? No, I didn't. I didn't want to spend too much time on that because I think that's that is a topic that really deserves, as you know, it deserves a whole, that deserves a whole different kind of analysis. And I don't know if I'd ever be able to do it, but one of these days, I was always thinking that I'd love to be able to just do a sit-down analysis of the commentary tracks that are on the Criterion Laserdiscs, and so just to get exactly what it is they're saying. And again, I don't know what the logistics of that would be. I mean, some of the stuff they're talking about is a little bit risque, as you know. Not everything, but some of it is. And so it's always been one of my my dreams, I suppose, for this YouTube channel to talk about a lot of things. One of which has been to talk about in detail those commentary tracks, because I think they are really. I mean, those are the types of commentary tracks that we really need. You know, of course, we would never have commentary tracks like that now because of legal ramifications and that kind of sort of need for. Well, let me just end there. But yeah, those are one of a kind, and so yeah, they deserve their own videos. So one of these days, hopefully. Let's see, just continuing. David Jones says Quentin Tarantino should direct the next 007 film with the title Casino Royale with Cheese. Yeah, that would be an interesting one. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, and there's some Quentin Tarantino jokes. We'll just, I'll save those for the Quentin Tarantino live stream, whenever that is. I don't know, but let's see. All right. And, okay. Eric Jensen's talking about another modern reboot of Bond. Would it work? I mean, never say never, but I don't know. I'm not sure how willing the powers that be would want that. I mean, I think artistically it would be really quite successful, but and you could solve budgeting issues. So, I mean, so on paper I think it would work beautifully. But again, is it possible? I mean, in the realm of what we know, the films are now. I don't know, but let's see. Rachel says, a wonderful discussion as always, Jessica. No, not at all. The comments of everyone in the group and yours in particular made it worthwhile for me. So thank you so much. And mainly movies too. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for your work. Again, your Bond videos and other videos on your wonderful channel are well worth checking out. So. You have two great channels already there. Rachel, the Music Man VC, and Mainly Movies. And then Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader too. So Spencer and I, in case you didn't know, Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader, his name is Spencer, our dear friend, my dear friend, and we had a couple of great conversations. Was it last week, I think, about James Bond. This topic was James Bond, and so Spencer was sharing with me his wonderful experience and expertise with the topic of Bond, and so I think we know already how much he knows about it, because he is so knowledgeable and so wonderful with sharing his knowledge with the rest of us. I, for one, am so grateful as always. And so if you want to check out those conversations that I had with Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader, Spencer, you can check those out on videos on this channel. Also, of course, please check out Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader's channel. And subscribe to it. Subscribe to all the channels that you can, right? There's no limit to subscriptions to channels, I think, right? So you can subscribe to as many as you want. So subscribe to him, subscribe to Mainly Movies, subscribe to Rachel, the Music Man VC, comment to them, thumbs up, like them, hit, what is it, the bell, what is it, the bell icon, notifications, do all that stuff, support those channels and many others, of course. I'm mentioning those, there are many others as well. So worth it, so worth it. And you know what, with those channels and more, but let's take these 3 channels as examples, because they are great examples of this, my friends. These channels are so wonderful, not just because of their topics. They are great topics, music, cinema, of course, but they are wonderful because at the heart and center of these channels are 3 really great, warm, caring individuals that I'm so proud to call my friends. Not just that, I am so honored that they would consider me to be their friends. And so it is, you subscribe to these channels, and you're not just subscribing to channels, but you are really talking with really genuinely warm people. And so I can't stress that enough. So once again, there are many other channels as well I'd love to talk about, and I've talked about many channels on my own channel here, but I have them here. Rachel in Mainly Movies and Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader, they're all here. So check those out. Check out many other YouTube channels as well. Support them as much as you can. And subscribing doesn't cost you a thing. It doesn't cost you anything. Just push that button and you can subscribe to them and just really just watch their videos and have fun with them, because they're really great people. And let's see, Mohit Singh is here. Hello. You say, hey, Daisuke, konnichiwa. Konnichiwa or konbanwa. お元気ですか？そうですね。今日は、007についての、YouTube の、生放送、ライブ配信、ライブの、ライブストリームという、ライブストリームを行っておりました。Thank you very much for that. Let's see. I hope you're well, Mohit. Thank you very much for joining. David Jones says, I had the same DVD release of Dr. No as displayed on your film stand, Daisuke. Yes, I love this version of the film. Yes, I have the Blu-ray here as well, and I must admit that I am more familiar with the film on the DVD release and then on the Criterion Laserdisc than I am on the Blu-ray, because I got the Blu-ray set recently. And I must say that I love Blu-ray. I love the format, don't get me wrong. But there was a little bit of crackling noise that I noticed, because I played it with headphones on. And there was some crackling noise that I noticed. And there was also, not everywhere, but not even once in a while, but in 1 or 2 places I noticed that there's some crackling that I never heard before. Also the menu that I have for this particular release, for some reason they bring the music down like they bring the note down. I don't know what the correct music phraseology is, but they bring it down, and so it doesn't match what I'm used to when I'm hearing. It's like it's slowed down for some reason. I don't quite understand that myself, but I personally prefer the DVD and the Laserdisc. Although again, I know people enjoy the Blu-ray very much, and I don't want to take that away from them. And so it's a fine presentation, let me put it that way. But as far as my own personal preferences go, yes, I love these DVDs. I really do. I've had these since forever. And there's something else too that I really want to mention, which is, this is a completely off topic, but there's something about Blu-ray art and older DVD art. And I always liked this DVD art very much from this series. And then I don't know if I'm a big fan of the Blu-ray art that came a little bit later, but I like this kind of, these sort of, not quite illustrations, but they use different fonts here. If you know these MGM DVDs, they had different font styles, and also the menus were interesting. I'm going to talk about it with Goldfinger, but as you know, Goldfinger was essentially taken from from earlier like laserdisc materials, and so they seem to be that in Thunderball, right? And so they seem to be set off a little bit. But what's interesting about the Goldfinger DVD menu is that I don't know if you notice this, but it's so hard. They have it so it's like a gold bar, I think, when you select on the particular part of the menu, but I always find it so difficult. Like I press it, but the color scheme is such that I don't know what's being selected. So I press it, and I think I'm here, but actually I'm selected here, and so it's kind of confusing. But I find that menu in Goldfinger DVD to be really charming indeed, and I love that. And the menus, I remember when these were released. I'm sorry, I'm going off on this tangent. I'm sorry. I'll end it here. I promise. But I remember when these were released, they were kind of being released in piecemeal, or they were being released in sets or boxes, I think. And so you had one set of films that were released, and then another set of films was released maybe a few months later or something. And then the final set of films was released a few months later. So it was all released in piecemeal in these sets, and it wasn't in chronological order. And so you got them all basically in whatever order that you got them. I forget the exact order, but I so remember just waiting, the anticipation for getting the next series of the DVDs, because I wanted to enjoy the menus. You know, the menus are so cool, and the voice of the, please activate your navigation screen now, and you have to press the button. With other DVDs and Blu-rays, you just put the disc in and it just goes into the menu automatically. But here, it prompts you to press the button first, and then it takes you to the menu screen, and I love that. And it goes into the little the music cue and the little the menu and all that. And I really love that. I love those menus, and that's just part of the charm of these DVDs that I will never tire of, and that holds true for Dr. No, but that holds true for all the other DVDs. I have all of them. They have them all in the series up to what was it? The Pierce Brosnan years, and so those are really great. But I really like the ones up through to License to Kill, because they have that same kind of style to them. And there's one thing too, and I'll talk about this with A View to a Kill, which is how Patrick Macnee was essentially narrating all of the making of documentaries for each of the films that's included in each of the DVDs, which have now been carried over into the supplements that we have of the Bond films up to now. They're great. They're really great documentaries. I love those documentaries. I saw them so many times. But I love the bit where, because Patrick Macnee he's in A View to a Kill, right? And so they had to have a different narrator to come in and narrate the documentary for A View to a Kill. And so I remember feeling, I don't know if you felt the same way, if you know the documentary for A View to a Kill, but there was a quick moment when he appeared as an interviewee for the documentary of A View to a Kill. He wasn't the narrator, of course, as I said, but he was being interviewed. And I remember when he first appeared in his interview, there was a quick moment I felt so out of place, because it was such a weird feeling. Here I was watching Patrick Macnee talking about a Bond film, where up to now I had been seeing all these documentaries where he was the voice of the narrator. So it was this weird out of body experience that I had for the split second when I watched that moment. I love that moment, and I still feel that way every time I watch the View to a Kill documentary and I see that moment. But this is a great set. This is such a great series of films, and they had and I love, there was one phrase, again, I'm completely going ahead of myself, but there's one phrase in the documentary about the man with a golden gun. It was mentioned in the live chat earlier. And, I know the Man with the Golden Gun is probably not considered to be the greatest Bond film ever. And I think a lot of people, perhaps reasonably so, they tend to criticize it a lot for many of its elements. Okay, I get that. And I think that was in the air when the Man with the Golden Gun DVD was being made, and the documentary is being made. And I remember Patrick McNee's comment at the end of the documentary for A Man with a Golden Gun. I thought was was so such a lovely turn of phrase, and it really balanced all these different views on the Man with the Golden Gun really well. I mean, I think implicit in the message was the fact that it was acknowledged perhaps that this was not the most critically successful film in this series. And what Patrick McNee's narration said was, and I'm paraphrasing, A Man with a Golden Gun is a film with all the right ingredients. It's a film with all the right ingredients. I thought that is such a really clever way of going around this sort of unspoken point about it not necessarily being the most popular Bond film in the series. And that was such a clever, tasteful way of dealing with it, I thought. And that's an example of why I think those documentaries are great. Also, it was a great point too, because it was something that was brought up in our conversation that I had with Spencer, and The Man with the Golden Gun was brought up, and he mentioned the fact that of course the famous scene with the car and the turn and the jump, right, and the noise that's used. But what's great about, and I wasn't able to mention this in the conversation, but I'll mention it now, which is that what's great about the documentary about the Man with the Golden Gun, which is first appearing on the DVD, which is that we see the jump, the car jump, the famous car jump, without the sound effect, but rather it has music, the John Barry music overlaid on it. So it gives the slow motion shot, the car jump, an almost air of majesty about it. And it is such a great way to treat that moment. It is a controversial moment, and I'll get to that in the discussion of The Man with the Golden Gun. But that's one of the things why I really love the documentaries. An example being The Man with the Golden Guns, because it's almost in a way also serving to kind of address some of the controversies that have arisen with some of the Bond films over the years. And I really loved the treatment of The Man with the Golden Gun in that one in particular. I thought it was so tasteful, so well done. But anyway, sorry about that. I just yeah. And I'm sorry. Just one other thing about the DVDs, and I'll leave. But you have to remember too that one of the great exciting things about it was also seeing these films and just enjoying them, and also the commentary tracks that were there. It was so great to hear the commentary tracks for these, and also the secondary documentaries, right? Because they'd have the making of documentaries, and then they'd have secondary documentaries on whatever. There would be one on Terrence Young, and on one disc there would be one on Harry Saltzman called Showman. On another disc there would be one about the John Barry's music and his contribution, and there would be one about the gadgets. And those sorts of things. And so one of the great things about waiting for the DVDs as they arrived was also thinking about what new secondary documentaries would arrive for the discs. And so I would always be imagining what would be next, and that was part of the fun with these DVDs. So I'm so glad you brought them up. I'm so sorry to have dragged out the conversation in this direction. I apologize, but I rarely get a chance to talk about these DVDs, and I really want to say how much I adore them. I still have them. They're on the shelves there. I will never get rid of them. They are to me a part of the collection that I have that I will never ever get rid of, because they just mean so much to me. But yes. Yes, Damn Full Ideals of Crusaders. Yes, says the DVD menus, special edition DVD menus are still adored by many. Yes, yes, I'm included in that. They have such a charm and identity. Yes, they were released in 3 volumes out of order. Yes. And so I think I remember most. I think it was like Living Daylights and A View to a Kill. I think I remember, were they maybe released in the latter part of the release order, if I remember correctly? I seem to recall that I was anticipating those the most, and they came later. Yeah, those are great. Yeah. Oh, Razor Wire reviews. Yes, Luke. Underneath the Mango Tree. Yes. Yes, and it's nice to see you, my friend. And that, speaking of great channels, Razor Wire Reviews, he so kindly invited me to discuss the film only yesterday. It's not a Bond film, I get it, but it's still a great Studio Ghibli film, animation film from Japan. So check out that discussion if you can. But that's not all, because Razor Wire Reviews is the one of the best channels out there. It's he I owe him a lot. I really do. So Razor Wire Reviews, and so yes, my favorite part. As you said, my favorite part of Doctor No is the hair being placed across the door. Yes, I talked about that. Yes, yes. Unless I'm mixing it up with another Connery bar. No, no. It's been about 8 years since I watched them all. Yes. AKJK said, "Hi Daisuke. I just arrived on the stream. I wanted to say hi. I haven't seen Doctor No, but I'll be watching it soon." And let's see, and I'll come back to this. Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader says License to Kill was box 1. Yes, is what was it, box 1? I don't remember. License to Living Daylights was box 2, if I recall correctly, on the special editions. On the UE's TLD was box 1, and LKA was box 2. I want to say also on the special edition DVDs, the was A View to a Kill, I think, was later. And I think I want to say that because I was anticipating so much the secondary documentary on the music of James Bond. And as you know, am I remembering it correctly, the music of James Bond secondary documentary appears with View to a Kill. So, but I could have that mixed up. It's been quite a while. Eric says, in Sweden we had a Bond marathon a month back where they showed all Bond movies on one movie channel. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. That's great. That is really great. I can have you continue. I can have Bond movies on loop all day long, sleep a bit, then keep watching. Yes, yes, I feel the exact same way. There's something about a Bond film that you can just watch, and then it can just have it. You have it running, or it just it becomes it gets into your pores or something. I'm not sure. Just really. There's something really magical about them, but I agree completely. I absolutely agree completely. So, well said, my friend, well said. And let's see. All right. I think that is it for now. Oh, so just, okay, as Eric says, and then if I get bored or want to eat, I'll put on commentary tracks when I want to eat, and then I'll have to go to the kitchen. I have to go to the kitchen, yes. So those commentary tracks are really great. There's one particular moment, I'm sorry, I have to go soon, but there's one particular moment with the Moonraker commentary track. And there's mention of a particular line early on in the film that Drax says to Bond, but I'll get to that when we do the Moonraker discussion. That's another film that I really enjoy very much, Moonraker, but I can't wait to talk about that one. But okay, so let us end, because I really have to. I'm starting to feel it. I'm not as energetic as I would like to be, so I must end it now. So thank you so much, my friends, for taking the time to stop by. I really appreciate it, really, really appreciate it. And your comments were great and lovely and so enthusiastic and energetic, and just really, really made my day, or made my evening. So thank you so much for that, my friends. I couldn't do it without you. I really couldn't. So. As I'm ending, Max Devereaux says hello from Minneapolis. Hello, thank you. Just made it. Hello, it's nice to see you. And so I am just so grateful, and I can't wait to talk to you more about other Bond films. And Again, Bond films are resilient. They are tough. They are so tough and resilient that we can agree to disagree on some things and still come out at the end of it, still being friends and still loving Bond films and loving cinema and still going to sleep and waking up the next day and still being friends and talking about this great thing that we love, which is cinema and James Bond films as well. So thank you so much again, my dear friends, for just being who you are and just your support and kindness and friendship are truly, truly appreciated by me. Really, thank you so much. And I will see you again very soon. 2 weeks from now, we will be talking about Daniel Craig's debut outing as 007 in the film Casino Royale. And then after that, I will let you know as to the plan, because after that we still have to talk about Live and Let Die, and then we have to talk about GoldenEye. I will try to set up the schedule for those two films afterwards. So please stay tuned to this channel for further updates. But in the meantime, once again, 2 weeks from today, the schedule is on the community board, but I'll put it up again just in case. 2 weeks, not 1 week, but 2 weeks from today, we will be talking about the Daniel Craig film, Casino Royale. So I look forward to seeing you there, my friends. I hope, in the meantime, I hope you have a really great rest of your day, your week, whatever the case may be. Continue to take very good care of yourselves. That is the most important thing. A lot of hectic, stressful things have been happening this year, as you know. So I hope, with all the stuff that's going on, my friends, I hope that you are taking very good care of yourselves and your family and friends, staying in good health and in good spirits, because that is the number one most important thing, is your health and your well-being. So please, I hope that you continue to stay well, stay safe, and just take very good care of yourselves, because you deserve it, my friends. Again, that is the most important thing. And with that, let us, once that is taken care of course, let us keep enjoying watching cinema and watching James Bond films. So thank you once again, my friends, and see you very soon. So James Bond will return. Cheers. Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Ooh, ugh. All right. Thank you. I'm so sorry, but my voice is really giving way now, so I'm going to have to just call it an evening. So thank you very much, my friends, once again, and see you very soon. So cheers and be well. Cheers.